Okay, let's going to start. Today is I will going to explain about Greece democracy, and this is the first time for explain Greece democracy. This is the final video to explain Greece democracy, and Obama will going to make a speech. Then after this, I'm going to get into Roman democracy. And let's going to start this is very rare video. American president, his final trip, he selected Greece, and he made a presentation regarding Greece democracy for Greece people. And later the latter part of his presentation, he just explained for how they're going to better relationship with Greece company and American company. This is a very long video, but this is very rare case. He just very politely explained what is Greece. Just listen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please have a seat. Thank you. Chicago. Hello, Greece. Thank you. Yasas. Kalispira.
He speaks Greece.
To the government and the people of Greece, including Prime Minister Tsipras, who I thank for his partnership and for being here.
Tsipras is the Prime Minister of this country, okay? And he speaks very polite English. So I think not so many words, not so many new words, not difficult.
Here, along with so many young people,
maybe you understand.
The future of Greece. I want to thank you for your warm and generous welcome. As many of you know, this is my final trip overseas as President of the United States. And I was determined on my last trip to come to Greece. Partly because I've heard about the legendary hospitality of the Greek people, your philoxenia. Partly because I had to see the Acropolis and the Parthenon.
Oh, this is 2016, November 16th.
Also because I came
already
here
Trump won.
With gratitude for all that Greece.
So carefully you listen, and he just talking about some criticize for Trump later part.
This small, great world has given to humanity through the ages. Our hearts have been moved by the tragedies of Aeschylus and Euripides. Our minds have been opened by the histories of Herodotus and Thucydides.
So Herodotus and Thucydides is Greece mice person.
Our understanding of the world.
And I explained it somewhere in the Japanese version.
Has been expanded by Socrates and Aristotle. In the United States, we're especially grateful for the friendship of so many proud Greek Americans. In my hometown of Chicago, you can find them in Greektown with their fustanella. Together we've celebrated Greek Independence Day at the White House. We've had some spanakopita and some ouzo. Greek Americans have worn the uniform to keep our country free. Greek Americans have marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to make us more just.
Okay, why I'm going to show this Greece democracy, talking about this? Because I already explained in 10 years later, Japanese society of democracy will shifting to very closer to Greece democracy, because majority people, unemployed people, they don't need to work anymore. And Greece's population is 400,000 population, and 100,000 is civilian. The other 300,000 people is slaves and women. They don't have voting right, but 100,000 people, they have voting right, and they do not do any work at that time. This is 2,500 years ago. Okay, so Japan is going to 10 years later. Many people, or maybe I'm not sure how many people, but 20 million, or maybe 10 million, more than people, they don't need to work because of robotization, AI tools implemented. So they are going to release from white collar working environment. Okay, so this causes many people, they don't go to work. So it means very similar to Greece democracy. At that time, civilian people, they didn't work. So we need to study what they did before. So we try to remind Greece democracy and Roman democracy, what they did in 2,500 years ago. So we try to study that. Then we try to consider for what is the people or civilian objective to survive. Okay?
Us.
But this one is the last video of Greece democracy.
Greek or American, we're all cheering for Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's who seems to be getting better each year. And if anyone seeks an example of our shared spirit, our resilience, they need to look no further than New York City, near Ground Zero, where the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Nicholas, once in ruins, is now rising again. Most of all, we're indebted to Greece for the most precious of gifts. The truth, the understanding that as individuals of free will, we have the right and the capacity to govern ourselves. For it was here, 25 centuries ago, in the rocky hills of this city.
So 25 centuries ago, this Greece democracy, the era. And why he uploaded, because America is based on Greece democracy. He said right and will.
And a new idea emerged. Demokratia.
Demokratia is Greece word. And demos is power. Kratia, people.
Kratos, the power, the right to rule, comes from demos.
Oh, sorry, demo is people. And democratia, kratia is power.
The notion that we are citizens, not servants, but stewards of our society. The concept of citizenship, that we have both rights and responsibilities. The belief in equality before the law, not just for a few, but for the many, not just for the majority, but also the minority. These are all concepts that grew out of this rocky soil. Of course, the earliest forms of democracy here in Athens were far from perfect, just as the early forms of democracy in the United States were far from perfect. The rights of ancient Athens were not extended to women or to slaves.
He said
But
they didn't.
Pericles explained our Constitution.
Women and slave didn't have vote. The woman and slave didn't recognized by civilian.
Favors the many instead of the few. This is why it is called a democracy. Athenians also knew that however noble, ideas alone were not enough. To have meaning, principles must be enshrined in laws and protected by institutions and advanced through civic participation. And so they gathered in a great assembly to debate and decide affairs of state, each citizen with the right to speak, casting their vote with a show of hands or choosing a pebble. White for yes,
Pebble is a voting stick was a pebble, white and black.
black for no. Laws were etched in stone for all to see and abide by. Courts with citizen jurors upheld that rule of law. Politicians weren't always happy because sometimes the stones could be used to ostracize, banish those who did not behave themselves.
Okay, so this ostracize this is this one is voting is pebble of black and white. This is Tohen. This is ostracize. Get out of the Greece city. Banish. Who did not behave themselves.
But across the millennia that followed, different views of power and governance have often prevailed. Throughout human history, there have been those who argue that people cannot handle democracy, that they cannot handle self-determination. They need to be told what to do. A ruler has to maintain order through violence or coercion or an iron fist. There's been a different concept of government that says might makes right, or that unchecked power can be passed through bloodlines. There's been the belief that some are superior by virtue of race or faith or ethnicity. And those beliefs so often have been used to justify conquest and exploitation and war. But through all this history, the flame first lit here in Athens never died. It was ultimately nurtured by a great enlightenment. It was fanned by America's founders, who declared that we the people shall rule, that all men are created equal.
But actually he said, but not all the way around democracy did not survive. After Greece and the Roman Empire, then after that, more than 1,000 years, they have no democracy until the French Revolution.
And endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, at times, even today, those ideals are challenged. We've been told that these are Western ideals. We've been told that some cultures are not equipped for democratic governance and actually prefer authoritarian rule. And I will say that after 8 years of being President of the United States, having traveled around the globe, it is absolutely true that every country travels its own path. Every country has its own traditions. But what I also believe after 8 years is that the basic longing to live with dignity, the fundamental desire to have control of our lives and our future, and to want to be a part of determining the course of our communities and our nations, these yearnings are universal. They burn in every human heart. It's why a Greek bishop atop a mountain raised the flag of independence. It's why peoples from the Americas to Africa to Asia threw off the yoke of colonialism. It's why people behind an Iron Curtain marched in solidarity and tore down that wall and joined you in a great union of democracies. It's why today we support the right of Ukrainians to choose their own destiny, why we partner with Tunisians and the people of Myanmar as they make historic transitions to democracy. This has been my foreign policy during my presidency. By necessity, we work with all countries, and many of them are not democracies. Some of them are democracies in the sense they have elections, but not democracies in the sense of actually permitting participation and dissent.
He understands globally is very few countries are democracies. Many people authoritarian.
But our trajectory as a country has been to support the efforts of those who believe in self-governance, who believe in those ideas that began here so many years ago. And it is not simply a matter of us being true to our values. It's not just a matter of idealism. I believe it is practical for the United States to support democracies. Because
he said practical means actually the United States is not practical. This is an oligarchy, this country. And actually, Obama didn't implement anything at all. But he said support democracy, but actually it failed.
Because history shows us that countries with democratic governance tend to be more just and more stable and more successful. Open democratic societies can deliver more prosperity because when people are free to think for themselves and share ideas and discover and create, the young people who are here, what they're able to do through the internet and technology, that's when innovation is unleashed, when economies truly flourish. It's when new products and new services and new ideas wash through an economy. In contrast to regimes that rule by coercion, democracies are rooted in consent of the governed. Citizens know that there's a path for peaceful change, including the moral force of nonviolence.
What he's talking about exactly so far, right? Exactly, America is like this, right?
And that brings a stability that so often can facilitate economic growth. The history of the past 2 centuries indicates that democracies are less likely to fight wars among themselves. So more democracy is good for the people of the world, but it's also good for our national security, which is why America's closest friends are democracies, like Greece. It's why we stand together in NATO, an alliance of democracies. In recent years, we've made historic investments in NATO, increased America's presence in Europe. In today's NATO, the world's greatest...
Why he's talking about NATO is at that time, Trump denied the existence of NATO at this time, last November, right?
Yeah. The alliance is as strong and as ready as it's ever been. And I am confident that just as America's commitment to the transatlantic alliance has endured for 7 decades, whether it's been under a Democratic or Republican administration, that commitment will continue, including our pledge and our treaty obligation to defend every ally.
But also Turkey is against NATO, and Erdogan decided to buy weapons from Russia. NATO and Russia is the enemy each other. So Turkey is switching from NATO to Russia. So he said ally.
Our democracies show that we're stronger than terrorists, and fundamentalists, and absolutists who can't tolerate difference, can't tolerate ideas that vary from their own, who try to change people's way of life through violence, and would make us betray or shrink from our values. Democracy is stronger than organizations like ISIL. Because our democracies are inclusive, we're able to welcome people and refugees in need to our countries. And nowhere have we seen that compassion more evident than here in Greece.
Okay, he just praised Greece because of the refugees. This is another criticize for Trump. Trump is the Islamic people banned to get in the United States country at that time, right?
Yeah.
So this is the army, and the army. This is people is some people force them to attend. Okay, this is army.
Greek people's generosity towards refugees arriving on your shores has inspired the world. That doesn't mean that you should be left on your own. And
he said you should be left on your own means he is considered for current EU's positioning. Greece. He just
only a truly collective response by Europe and the world
by Europe and the world
can ensure that these desperate people receive the support that they need. Greece cannot be expected to bear the bulk of the burden alone, but the fact that you are a democracy opens your heart to people in need in a way that might not otherwise be the case. Just as democracies are premised on the peaceful resolution of disagreements within our societies, we also believe that cooperation and dialogue is the best way to address challenges between nations. And so it is my belief that democracies are more likely to try to resolve conflicts between nations.
Currently, Greece people listening his speeches because currently Greece has a big conflict among EU nations. So he's just talking about this.
In a way that does not result in war. That's how, with diplomacy, we were able to shut down Iran's nuclear weapons program.
This is Greece's Trump opinion. We are able to shut down Iran nuclear weapon program. This Trump is just neglect this kind of agreement with Iran, right?
Without firing a shot. With diplomacy, the United States opened relations with Cuba. With deployment.
Also, this is he criticized the Trump action for Cuba. He reconsidered the relationship with Cuba.
Diplomacy, we joined Greece. With diplomacy, we joined Greece and nearly 200 nations in the most ambitious agreement ever to save our planet from climate change.
This is another criticism, Trump. Do you understand? He's a Trump neglects climate change, right?
Yeah.
So he's a lot of issues he's talking about against Trump.
And speaking of climate change, I would point out that there is a connection between democracy and science. The premise of science is that we observe and we test our hypotheses, our ideas. We base decisions on facts, not superstition.
He said, superstition. This is what he said. Oh, Takashi, sorry, I just started. Somea came here, so I believe we start. Last week we finished Balfax, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this time is I just showing American President Obama's speech at Greece, and now he's explaining just 16 minutes already. I just spent some minutes here because I already started 16 minutes past. Now he's criticizing Trump's policy to the United States. He just each by each criticizing. Now he's talking about climate change.
Our ideology tells us, but rather what we can observe. And at a time when the globe is shrinking and more and more we are going to have to take collective action to deal with problems like climate change.
So he just persuading English people. Or at the rest of the world, global people, he tried to confirm how climate change is important rather than Trump decision.
The presence of a democratic debate allows this science to flourish and to shape our collective responses. Now, democracy, like all human institutions, is imperfect. It can be slow. It can be frustrating. It can be hard. It can be messy. Politicians tend to be unpopular in democracies.
He is talking about unpopular in democracy. Politicians, he is talking focus on Trump.
Regardless of party. Because, by definition, democracies require that you don't get 100% of what you want. It requires compromise. Winston Churchill famously said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And in a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural society like the United States, democracy can be especially complicated. Believe me, I know.
She's also talking about Trump, okay? Compromise.
But it is better than the alternatives because it allows us to peacefully work through our differences and move closer to our ideals. It allows us to test new ideas, and it allows us to correct for mistakes.
By the way, Takashi, I just uploaded already this video in the Facebook, so you can look at it. But since last week, I don't change anything at all, so you can have a look at the same video. Anyway,
when was this presentation made?
This one? This
Yes.
one? Oh no, I just submit now, and no change since last week, so you can use the same.
No. I mean, this speech is.
Oh, this video is last year November after the election.
Okay.
Okay, so just he just all the around he criticized Trump's decision, right? So it's a very interesting video.
Any action by a president or any result of an election or any legislation that has proven flawed can be corrected through the process of democracy. And throughout our history, it's how we have come to see that all people are created equal. Even though when we were founded, that was not the case. We could work to expand the rights that were established in our founding to African Americans and to women, to Americans with disabilities, to Native Americans. Why all Americans now have the freedom to marry the person they love.
This means Trump action is discriminate for Islamic people, right? And also supremacy for white people, right?
It's why we welcome people of all races and all religions and all backgrounds and immigrants who strive to give their children a better life.
This is another he criticized of Trump, right? You understand, right?
And make our country strong.
Interesting.
And so here, where democracy was born, we affirm once more the rights and the ideals and the institutions upon which our way of life endures. Freedom of speech and assembly, because true legitimacy can only come from the people, who must never be silenced. A free press to expose injustice and corruption and hold leaders accountable.
This is another issue he talking about, the free press and the injustice and corruption. And this one is actually the current Trump's opinion against media outlet.
freedom of religion, because we are all equal in the eyes of God. Independent judiciaries to uphold rule of law and human rights.
This is actually also he's just criticized Trump. Independent judiciaries. He just Trump is a lot of opinion against judiciaries, and he tried to change judiciaries and change the decision made a ban. Islamic people the entry ban decided by judiciaries, but he tried to change it.
Separation of powers to limit the reach of any one branch of government. Free and fair elections, because citizens must be able to choose their own leaders, even if your candidate doesn't always win. We compete hard in campaigns in America and here in Greece. But after the election, democracy depends on a peaceful transition of power, especially when you don't get the results you want. And as you may have noticed, the next American president and I could not be more different.
I could not be more different. It's completely different.
We have very different points of view, but
Oh, yeah.
American democracy is bigger than any one person. And that's why we have a tradition of the outgoing president welcoming the new one in, as I did last week. And why in the coming weeks my administration will do everything we can to support the smoothest transition possible, because that's how democracy has to work. And that's why, as hard as it can be sometimes,
Trump never listened to him.
It's important for young people in particular, who are just now becoming involved in the lives of their countries, to understand that progress follows a winding path. Sometimes forward, sometimes back. But as long as we retain our faith in democracy, as long as we retain our faith in the people, as long as we don't waver from those central principles that ensure a lively, open debate, then our future will be okay. Because it remains the most effective form of government ever devised by man. It is true, of course, over the last several years, that we've seen democracies faced with serious challenges. And I want to mention two that have an impact here in Greece, have an impact in the United States, and are having an impact around the world. The first involves the paradox of a modern global economy. The same forces of globalization and technology and integration that have delivered so much progress, have created so much wealth, have also revealed deep fault lines. Around the world, integration and closer cooperation and greater trade and commerce and the internet all have improved the lives of billions of people, lifted families from extreme poverty, cured diseases, helped people live longer, gave them more access to education and opportunity than at any time in human history. I've often said to young people in the United States, if you had to choose a moment in history to be born and you did not know ahead of time who you would be, you didn't know whether you were going to be born to a wealthy family or a poor family, what country you'd be born.
He's talking about recent younger people is very important, but Trump changed the policy very recently. But beforehand, he tried to force young people came from Mexico, and the other Middle American people force them to back to those countries. But he criticized that. But very recently, Trump changed the policy accept for those younger people stay in the States. I don't know, I can't remember how many people, but Obama accepted undocumented people, young people, stay in the States. That one he's talking about.
Whether you were going to be a man or a woman. If you had to choose blindly, what moment do you want to be born? You choose now. Because the world has never collectively been wealthier, better educated, healthier, less violent than it is today. That's hard to imagine given what we see in the news, but it's true. And a lot of that has to do with the developments of an integrated global economy. But trends underway for decades have meant that in many countries and in many communities, there have been enormous disruptions. Technology and automation means that goods can be produced with fewer workers. It means jobs in manufacturing can move across borders.
This is another clip that Bush, Trump, right?
Where wages are lower or rights are less protected. And that means that workers and unions oftentimes have less leverage to bargain for better wages.
Yeah, so this piece presentation is from the first to all the way around. He criticized Trump's policy, and what he said is true. But I tell you, but Trump is recently, gradually, he understands the current situation of his policy is very much wrong. So one by one, he going to change his policy now.
Better benefits. Have more difficulty competing in the global marketplace. Hardworking families worry their kids may not be better off than they were because of this global competition. What we've also seen is that this global integration is increasing the tendencies towards inequality, both between nations and within nations, at an accelerated pace. And when we see people, global elites, wealthy corporations, seemingly living by a different set of rules, avoiding taxes, manipulating loopholes, when the rich and the powerful appear to game the system and accumulate vast wealth while middle and working class families struggle to make ends meet, this feeds a profound sense of injustice and a feeling that our economies are increasingly unfair.
This one is, he's talking about supporting Trump's opinion. Trump's opinion, exactly like Obama said, and middle class is now eliminating, so need to revive those people coming in the stage.
This inequality now constitutes one of the greatest challenges to our economies and to our democracies. An inequality that was once tolerated because people didn't know how unequal things were, now won't be tolerated because everybody has a cell phone and can see how unequal things are. The awareness that people have in the smallest African village, they can see how people in London or New York are living. The poorest child in any of our countries now has a sense of what other people have that they don't. So not only is there increasing inequality, but also there's greater awareness of inequality, and that's a volatile mix for our democracies. And this is why addressing inequality has been one of the key areas of focus for my economic policy. In our countries, in America, and in most advanced market economies, we want people to be rewarded for their achievement. We think that people should be rewarded if they come up with a new product or a new service that is popular and helps a lot of people. But when a CEO of a company now makes more money in a single day than a typical worker does in an entire year, when it's harder for workers to climb their way up the economic ladder, when they see a factory close that used to support an entire city or town, that fuels the feeling that globalization only benefits those at the top. And the reaction can drag down a country's growth and make recessions more likely. It can also lead to politics that create an unhealthy competition between countries. Rather than a win-win situation, people perceive that if you're winning, I'm losing. And barriers come up and walls come up.
Now he's moving to discussing a little bit sophisticated environment. And rich people more rich, poor is poorer. And also economy is more globalized, and America losing opportunity for the getting profit. So he said barriers come up and walls come up, he said.
And in advanced economies, there are at times movements from both the left and the right to put a stop to integration and to push back against technology and to try to bring back jobs and industries that have been disappearing for decades. But this impulse to pull back from a globalized world is understandable. If people feel that they're losing control of their future, they will push back. We have seen it here in Greece. We've seen it across Europe. We've seen it in the United States. We saw it in the vote in Britain to leave the EU. But given the nature of technology, it is my assertion that it's not possible to cut ourselves off from one another. We now are living in a global supply chain. Our growth comes through innovation and ideas.
So he criticized Trump and criticized criticized Britain.
That are crossing borders all the time. The jobs of tomorrow will inevitably be different from the jobs of the past. So we can't look backwards for answers. We have to look forward. We cannot.
So backward is Trump, and Theresa May is the backward, he said.
Sever the connections that have enabled so much progress and so much wealth. For when competition for resources is perceived as zero-sum, we put ourselves on the path to conflict, both within countries and between countries. So I firmly believe that the best hope for human progress remains open markets combined with democracy and human rights.
So he's exactly right. Open market combined with democracy and human rights.
But I have argued that the current path of globalization demands a course correction. In the years and decades ahead, our countries have to make sure that the benefits of an integrated global economy are more broadly shared by more people.
So he's again criticized Trump, right? This is interesting, right?
But the negative impacts are squarely addressed. And we know. And we actually know the path to building more inclusive economies. It's just we too often don't have the political will or desire to get it done. We know we need bold policies that spur growth and support jobs. We know that we need to give workers more leverage and better wages. And
this is actually, Trump said, more leverage, give workers more leverage and better wages, right?
in fact, if you give workers better wages...
But this is not isolation. This is more globalization, he said.
Businesses do better too because their customers now have money to spend. We know that we have to invest more in our people, the education of our young people, the skills and training to compete in the global economy. We have to make sure that it is easy for young people who are eager to learn and eager to work to get the education that they need, the training that they need, without taking on huge amounts of debt. We know that we have to encourage entrepreneurship so that it's easier to start a business and do business. We know that we have to strengthen the social compact.
I think somebody beside this theater's corner tell them closing now. No. I think it's just that's the reason why.
So that the safety net that is available for people, including quality health care and retirement benefits, are there even if people aren't working in the same job for 30 years or 40
Oh, this one is Obamacare he's talking.
years or 50 years. We have to modernize our infrastructure, which will put people back to work. We have to commit to the science and research and development that sparks new industries. In our trading relationships, we have to make sure that trade works for us and not against us, and that means insisting on high standards in all countries to support jobs, strong protections for workers, strong protections for the environment, so that even as we freely trade, people and workers in all countries see the benefits of trade in their own lives, not just benefits for the bottom line of large multinational corporations. These are the kinds of policies, this is the work that I pursued throughout my time as president. Keep in mind, I took office in the midst of the worst crisis since the Great Depression. And we pursued a recovery that has been shared now by the vast majority of Americans. We put people back to work building bridges and roads. We passed tax cuts for the middle class.
But actually, he's just talking about this is actually fair, right?
We asked the wealthiest Americans to pay a little more taxes, their fair share. We intervened to save our auto industry, but insisted that the auto industry become more energy efficient, produce better cars that reduce pollution. We put in place policies to help students with loans and protect consumers from fraud. We passed the strongest Wall Street reforms in history so that the excesses and abuses that triggered the global financial crisis never happen again, or at least don't start on Wall Street.
This one is actually Trump will going to stop the Dodd-Frank law, right? This is what he said. So just eliminate the Dodd-Frank law and try to revive bank can invest money for encourage there to get more revenue instead of Obama did.
And today our businesses have created more than 15 million new jobs. Incomes last year in America rose faster than any time since 1968. Poverty fell at the fastest rate since 1968. Inequality is being narrowed. And we've also begun to close the pay gap between men and women. We declared that health care in America is a privilege, not for the few, but a right for everybody. Today our uninsured rate is at the lowest levels on record. And we've done all this while doubling our production of clean energy, lowering our carbon pollution faster than any advanced nation. So we've proven that you can grow the economy and reduce the carbon emissions that cause climate change at the same time. Now, I say all this not because we've solved every problem. Our work is far from complete. There are still too many people in America who are worried about their futures. Still too many people who are working at wages that don't get them above the poverty line. Still too many young people who don't see opportunity. But the policies I describe point the direction for where we need to go in building inclusive economies. And that's how democracies can deliver the prosperity and hope that our people need. And when people have opportunity and they feel confidence in the future, they are less likely to turn on each other and they're less likely to appeal to some of the darker forces that exist in all our societies, those that can tear us apart. Here in Greece, you're undergoing similar transformations. The first step has been to build a foundation that allows you to return to robust economic growth. And we don't need to recount all the causes of the economic crisis here in Greece. If we're honest, we can acknowledge that it was a mix of both internal and external forces. The Greek economy and the levels of debt had become unsustainable. And in this global economy, investment and jobs flow to countries where governments are efficient, not bloated, where the rules are clear. To stay competitive, to attract investment that creates jobs, Greece had to start a reform process. Of course, the world, I don't think, fully appreciates the extraordinary pain these reforms have involved, or the tremendous sacrifices that you, the Greek people, have made. I've been aware of it, and I've been proud of all that my administration has done to try to support Greece in these efforts. And part of the purpose of my visit is to highlight for the world the important steps that have been taken here in Greece. Today, the budget is back in surplus. Parliament passed reforms to make the economy more competitive. Yes, there is still much more work to do. I want to commend Prime Minister Tsipras for the very difficult reforms his government is pursuing to put the economy on a firmer footing. Now, as Greece works to attract more investment and to prevent old imbalances from re-emerging and to put your economy on a stronger foundation, you'll continue to have the full support of the United States. And at the same time, I will continue to urge creditors to take the steps needed to put Greece on a path towards sustained economic recovery. So as...
Oh, he is talking about austerity, more slower than austerity.
As Greece continues to implement reforms, the IMF has said that debt relief will be crucial to get Greece back to growth. They are right. It is important because if reforms here are going to be sustained, people need to see hope and they need to see progress, and the young people who are in attendance here today and all across the country need to know there is a future. There's an education and jobs that are worthy of your incredible potential. You don't have to travel overseas. You can put roots right here in your home in Greece and succeed.
Well, actually, Greece people, they go abroad for study, escape this country because they are very difficult to work here. Employment ratio very so high, especially for young people. So he said, should stay here.
And I'm confident that if you stay the course, as hard as it has been.
So why he's talking after this his speech, and the younger people, he just discussed with younger people, and success people overseas are coming back to Greece, so they have a look.
Greece will see brighter days, because in this magnificent hall and center, the symbol of the Greek culture and resilience, we're reminded that just as your strength and resolve have allowed you to overcome great odds throughout your history, nothing can break the spirit of the Greek people. You will overcome this period of challenge, just as you have other challenges in the past. So economics is something that will be central to preserving our democracies. When our economies don't work, our democracies become distorted and in some cases break down. But this brings me to another pressing challenge that our democracies face. How do we ensure that our diverse, multicultural, multiracial, multireligious world and our diverse nations uphold both the rights of individuals and a fundamental civic adherence to a common creed that binds us together? Democracy is simplest where everybody thinks alike, looks alike, eats the same food, worships the same God. Democracy becomes more difficult when there are people coming from a variety of backgrounds and trying to live together. In our globalized world, with the migration of people and the rapid movement of ideas and cultures and traditions, we see increasingly this blend of forces mixing together in ways that often enrich our societies, but also cause tensions. In the information age, the unprecedented exchange of information can also accentuate differences or seem to threaten cherished ways of life. It used to be that you might not know how people in another part of your country or in the cities versus the countryside were living. Now everybody knows how everybody's living, and everybody can feel threatened sometimes if people don't do things exactly the way they do things, and they start asking themselves questions about their own identity. And it can create a volatile politics. Faced with this new reality, where cultures clash, it's inevitable that some will seek a comfort in nationalism or tribe or ethnicity or sect.
This is also he criticized Trump. Trump is like this idea, white people superiority.
In countries that are held together by borders that were drawn by colonial powers,
okay, by border, together by border,
including many countries in the Middle East and in Africa, it can be tempting to fall back on the perceived safety of enclaves and tribal divisions. In a world of widening inequality, there's a growing suspicion or even disdain for elites and institutions that seem remote from the daily lives of ordinary people. What an irony it is. At a time when we can reach out to people in the most remote corners of the planet, so many citizens feel disconnected from their own governments. So, just as we have to have an inclusive economic strategy, we have to have an inclusive political and cultural strategy. In all of our capitals, we have to keep making government more open, more efficient, more effective in responding to the daily needs of citizens. Governing institutions, whether in Athens, Brussels, London, Washington, have to be responsive to the concerns of citizens. People have to know that they're being heard. Here in Europe, even with today's challenges, I believe that by virtue of the progress it has delivered over the decades, the stability it has provided, the security it's reinforced, that European integration and the European Union remains one of the great political and economic achievements of human history. And today more than ever, the world needs a Europe that is strong and prosperous and democratic. But all institutions in Europe have to ask themselves, how can we make sure that people within individual countries feel as if their voices are still being heard, that their identities are being affirmed, that the decisions that are being made that will have a critical impact on their lives are not so remote that they have no ability to impact. We have to make clear that governments exist to serve the interests of citizens and not the other way around. And so this is why, as President of the United States, I've pursued initiatives like the Open Government Partnership that promotes transparency and accountability so that ordinary people know more about the decisions that affect their lives. That's why, both at home and around the world, we have taken steps to fight corruption that can rot a society from within. As authoritarian governments work to close space that citizens depend upon to organize and have their voices heard, we've begun the work of empowering civil society to defend democratic values and promote solutions to the problems within our communities. And as so many people around the world sometimes are tempted by cynicism and not being involved because they think that politicians and government don't care about them, we've created networks for young leaders and invested in young entrepreneurs because we believe that the hope and renewal of our societies begins with the voices of youth.
I think the Japanese politician never speak out like this. Just he said, expecting and hoping for youth people.
Closing, our globalized world is passing through a time of profound change. Yes, there is uncertainty and there is unease. And none of us can know the future. History does not move in a straight line. Civil rights in America did not move in a straight line. Democracy in Greece did not move in a straight line. The evolution of a unified Europe certainly has not moved in a straight line. And progress is never guaranteed. Progress has to be earned by every generation. But I believe history gives us hope. 25 centuries after Athens first pointed the way, 250 years after the beginning of the great American journey, my faith and my confidence, my certainty in our democratic ideals and universal values remain undiminished. I believe more strongly than ever Dr. King was right when he said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it's bent towards justice. But it bends towards justice not because it is inevitable, but because we bend it towards justice. Not because there are not going to be barriers to achieving justice, but because there will be people, generation after generation, who have the vision and the courage and the will to bend the arc of our lives in the direction of a better future. In the United States and in every place I've visited these last 8 years, I have met citizens, especially young people, who have chosen hope over fear, who believe that they can shape their own destiny, who refuse to accept the world as it is and are determined to remake it as it should be. They have inspired me. In every corner of the world, I've met people who, in their daily lives, demonstrate that despite differences of race or religion or creed or color, we have the capacity to see each other in ourselves.
By the way, this morning is we discussed different way. It's currently like a Dutch. Is 10 years ago they have no discrimination. Now is they don't like Islamic people.
The one here in Greece who said of the refugees arriving on these shores, "We live under the same sun. We fall in love under the same moon. We are all human."
But he is true. But the European people tendency is different.
We have to help these people. Women like that give me hope.
Also this morning we discussed about woman prostitute, and I asked Ed, do you accept prostitute business? He said, of course, yes.
In all of our communities, in all of our countries, I still believe there's more of what Greeks call philotomy. Love and respect and kindness for family and community and country, and a sense that we're all in this together with obligations to each other. Philotomy. I see it every day, and that gives me hope.
He is true. This speech.
Because in the end, it is up to us. It's not somebody else's job, it's not somebody else's responsibility, but it's the citizens of our countries and the citizens of the world to bend that arc of history towards justice. And that's what democracy allows us to do. It's why the most important office in any country is not president or prime minister. The most important title is citizen. And in all of our nations, it will always be our citizens who decide the kind of countries we will be, the ideals that we will reach for, the values that will define us. In this great, imperfect, but necessary system of self-government, power and progress will always come from the demos, from we the people. And I'm confident that as long as we are true to that system of self-government, that our futures will be bright. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Zito!
I saw his presentation. He have a meeting with Greek people coming back from the States, and he supposed to communicate with those people. But just only this video, he just only all the way 15 minutes. He did make presentation for Greek people. This I mistaken, but all the way around he criticized Trump, right? Okay. Takashi, you are first time to have a look this video, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I found the starting point of Obama and Trump is the same. The both of them wanted to let the people the better off than they are in the past decade.
And all way, yes, go ahead.
And a process and the way of implementing the policy are totally different. So, as always, when we look at the Obama's speech and his policy of doing something, his way is something that encourage the people to do something toward the goal that they made. But the Obama wanted to encourage process. He implemented some policy to encourage the goal will be set by people. Whereas in Trump, they said that he set the goal at the past. That the Trump policy tends to set the goal fast, and toward goal, the Trump expecting the process to be made according to the goal he set.
I can't hear well. Say again. Trump, what's wrong for him?
The Trump's policy is something to set the goal fast.
Goal fast.
Goal. Then they expect the effort in the process to be headed toward the goal that Trump set. But Obama wants to implement some the way in the process. He wanted to encourage the process. Let the people find the better goals through the process he set.
Okay.
So his speech is always sounding like the encouragement of the people, saying that they can, and we are expecting the people to find the better goals.
Okay. Okay. So this is the finish of the Greece democracy. And now I'm going to get into the Roman democracy. And Greece democracy is different. Roman democracy is different from Greece democracy. Okay, and just we're going to review a little bit about guideline of the Roman democracy. The Roman Republic was the era of ancient Roman civilization, beginning with the overthrow of Roman kingdom, traditionally dated to 509 before BC, and ending in 27 BC, with the establishment of Roman Empire. It was during this period the Roman control expanded from the cities, immediate surroundings, to hegemony over the entire Mediterranean world. So this is a big difference of Greece and Roman. Roman government was headed by two councils, elected annually by the citizens and advised by a Senate composed of appointed magistrates. As Roman society was very hierarchical by modern standards, the evolution of the Roman government was heavily influenced by the struggle between the patricians, Roma's land-holding aristocracy, who traced their ancestry to the founding of Rome, and plebeians, civilian plebeians, the far more numerous citizens, commoners. Over time, laws that gave patricians exclusive rights to Roma's highest offices were repealed or weakened, and leading plebeian families became full members of the aristocracy. The leaders of the Republic developed strong traditions and morality, requiring public service and patronage in peace and war, making military and political success inextricably linked. Many of Rome's legal and legislative structure later codified into the Justinian Code, and again into the Napoleonic Code, can still be observed throughout Europe and much of the world in modern nation states and international organizations. During the first 2 centuries of this existence, the Roman Republic expanded through a combination of conquest and alliance from central Italy to the entire Italian peninsula. By the following century, it included North Africa, most of the Iberian Peninsula, and what is now southern France. 2 centuries after that, toward the end of the 1st century BC, it included the rest of modern France, Greece, and much of the eastern Mediterranean. By this time, internal tension led to a series of civil wars, culminating with the assassination of Julius Caesar, which led to the transition from republic to empire. The exact date of transition can be a matter of interpretation. Historians have variously proposed Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon River in 49 BC, Caesar's appointment as dictator for life in 44 BC, and the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. However, most use of same date as did the ancient Romans themselves. The Roman Senate grant for extraordinary powers to Octavian and his adopting the title Augustus in 27 BC as the defining event ending the Republic. This is totally, history of the Roman, just summarized. And this is very different from Greece democracy. Roman democracy is very hierarchically. Not all civilian is they had both, but just the voting system is structured. So now is just explanation. Some Japanese over here, and Justinian Code is all famous. The Napoleonic Code is also very famous. Just I put an explanation here. And Julius Caesar, also the Octavians, and I explained, put in Japanese, but I don't read this. And then I want to get into the third video. Is this is, I think, very interesting video. Ancient Rome. They're going to show the Rome city. How is that? This is very not difficult. This is very some image of the Roman city. How do you like? I can't see the what? I can't. Pointer disappeared. Why pointer disappeared?
I don't know.
When I was studying ancient Rome, one of the most difficult things for me to understand is how all of these ancient ruins fit together. But luckily, we have Dr. Bernard Fischer, who has built an extraordinary video simulation that allows us to move through this space.
Okay, he's going to show the video demonstration, what those looks like a Roman city.
Yes. The difficulty is always twofold. First of all, the ancient city is now in ruins, so one problem we have is how do you go from the ruins to the way it did look in antiquity? Secondly, we only have random ruins. We don't have everything. So even if you could visualize what the Pantheon looked like or the Colosseum, they're a mile apart in the city. What was everything else? Most of it is missing. So the visualization is trying to put the whole city together.
And so let's take a look.
Okay.
It is just beautiful. We're now flying low over the city, over the Tiber.
It's a good place to start because, the Tiber does divide Rome into two parts.
And I see in the distance a very large temple.
That's the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the best and the greatest, which was the main temple of the Roman state cult. And it's on top of the Capitoline Hill, which, because of this temple and some others, was considered the center of the state cult and the state religion.
So what moment in Rome's history have you chosen?
This is notionally the year 320 AD. the peak of Rome's urban development, certainly in terms of public architecture, for the simple reason that the emperor at this time was Constantine the Great, and shortly after this year, he moved the capital from Rome to his city of Constantinople. Okay, so we're flying up the river, and after the Capitoline Hill, we see the Palatine Hill, another one of the 7 canonical hills of Rome.
And the Palatine is obvious to anybody who visits Rome. If you're in the Forum, this is the great hill with the palaces.
In fact, the word palace derives from the word Palatine. The Romans, as time went on in their history, said wherever the emperor is, there the palace is, or the Palatine. So the term palace got detached from this physical hill and came to just mean a place where the ruler lives.
And actually, as we're flying past what is the Circus Maximus, I see the Imperial Palace. This is so large, it has literally enveloped the entire hillside.
We have to remember this was not only where the emperor lived and his family with him, but it was also the center of government.
Any important relationship between this enormous circus and the palace?
They are in fact connected, and the emperor was a great giver of the circus games and could easily come down to the imperial box from the palace, or if he wanted, he could even watch the circus races from at the palace.
So we're not talking about Barnum and Bailey, we're talking about sporting events.
We're mainly talking about chariot races. Think Ben-Hur, the famous chariot race scenes. And there were also animal hunts, there were parades, religious processions, the triumphal procession.
So let's go into the city proper. We know that Rome was this mercantile culture that had real markets. How much do we know about the daily lives of the inhabitants?
We know a huge amount. We know about their hundreds of trades and professions, the different social classes. We know about their diet. We know about their longevity. The scholars have really reconstructed in great detail what everyday life was like.
So one of the most impressive structures that I'm seeing is this aqueduct, this highway for water.
Yeah, the Romans are famous for their aqueducts.
It's unbelievable. This is 2,500 years ago.
Never could have had the big city of 1 million or even 2 million that we're now seeing without the aqueducts. It brought water in from 20 or 30 miles away in the mountains. They kept this gravitational system working by getting the sources up in the mountains, bringing it down into the city in the valley, which gave the force to the water. And they were able to somehow calculate a slope of even just 1 foot every 2,000 feet, which is remarkable. We don't know how they could measure so accurately, so that the water kept moving gently downhill but relentlessly downhill.
There is this kind of ambition, this notion that man can control nature, does not need to build a city where the water is already, but one can actually bend nature to man's will.
The Romans were remarkable engineers. They used the water for drinking purposes, obviously cooking and so on, but also a lot of these aqueducts ended at great fountains, but also in the great public baths.
So this area seems to be sort of set apart from this denser urban part of the city. And these are the baths of Trajan.
Yes, these were not the first public baths, but they were the baths that gave the standard design for public baths. A block of bathing buildings in the middle of a kind of a garden area delimited by a wall.
And we were talking earlier about the way in which the emperors would provide for the well-being of the city, and this is really a prime example. So now we're moving to some of the most well-known monuments in ancient Rome, the Colosseum. But we're in a fairly late moment in Roman history. Before the Colosseum, wasn't there another palace here?
There was. The Colosseum was built by the Emperor Vespasian, who became emperor in 69 AD, after the suicide of Nero, a very unpopular emperor. And one of the reasons he was so unpopular was that after the Great Fire of 64 AD, in which a lot of the city was destroyed, he took over 100 acres in the heart of the city and converted it from private property to his own personal use as a palace, the Golden House of Nero. And the Colosseum was actually a lake in that palace. And Vespasian, to show he was like a friend of the people, filled in that lake and built the Colosseum on top of it.
The Colosseum was not originally called the Colosseum.
No, that's a term that only goes back to the early Middle Ages. The Romans called it the Flavian Amphitheater because Vespasian's family name was Flavius, so Flavian. And it's an amphitheater, or kind of a double theater, oval in shape. The Romans certainly didn't call it Colosseum, but they did call this enormous statue the Colossus. It's a statue of the sun god.
Now, you had mentioned that this is the moment when Constantine rules Rome and has not yet moved the capital to the east. I think it's interesting to look at his arch, the Arch of Constantine, and realize that this is brand new.
It's only a couple of years old. Constantine left Rome after he defeated Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. As far as we know, he never came back to Rome to actually see it.
So we've just risen over the edge of the Colosseum. We're looking down.
This is, in a way, a mirror of Roman society. The best seats are the ones farthest down, closest to the arena, and that was reserved for the emperor, top office holders, priests, and so on. Then behind them were the senators, behind them the wealthy businessmen, and behind them the freeborn normal citizens. At the very top sat women, slaves, and foreigners.
So what were they coming to watch?
As we can see now, what's going on is the main thing that we associate with the Colosseum, the gladiatorial combats. Another thing that went on here that the Romans loved was hunts of wild animals. The third thing is the execution of criminals, often in very colorful ways that we would find very cruel.
So let's make a left turn and move towards the Forum. What is that enormous temple?
It's the biggest temple of the state religion. It's a temple of Venus and Rome. It was built by the Emperor Hadrian. It's actually interesting because it's two temples back to back. One part of it is dedicated to the worship of the goddess Venus. That's the one facing the Colosseum. The other to the goddess Roma. That's facing the Forum. And there seems to be a reason for that. Venus is looking at the Colosseum, which is associated with fun and games. Otium, the Romans would say, leisure. Whereas Roma is a more serious goddess. She's facing the Forum, which is the area of negotium, or business and work.
Okay, so now we're moving over to the Forum itself.
And we'll stop first at the Basilica of Maxentius, the last of the great civic buildings built in Rome before Constantine moved the capital.
This is a huge structure, and the word basilica is familiar to us. We often call churches basilicas now.
For the Romans, it was a civic building used mainly for courts. The Christians adopted the building form because they worship inside. So they adopted this pre-existing building form and gave it a new content.
So now we're moving into one of the most complicated parts of Rome, and especially when you try to look at the ruins and understand how these buildings related to each other.
I always say the Forum is like the mall in Washington. It's a big open public space used for public events like parades and speeches. The buildings around that open space are also public, and they are courthouses and temples. Then on the Forum Plaza are, as in the case of the mall in Washington, monuments commemorating great men and important events. Adjacent to the Forum, private property was increasingly bought up so that each emperor could build his own forum, the so-called imperial or fora of the emperors.
We've made a full circle, and we're now looking again at the Capitoline.
We're flying over the Roman Forum. We'll actually come back to it. We're flying over the Capitoline Hill. Now we can see the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus. And we're going beyond, back toward the river, where we find a big flat area of Rome called the Campus Martius, the Field of Mars. It was called that because in the Roman Republic, when there was a citizen army, the army would meet here and train.
Now, we've just moved over this lovely squared pond, and we're looking at the flank of an enormously important building, the Pantheon.
The rotunda, the round part, we wouldn't really see in antiquity. We would see the part that has the 8 columns across the front that looks like a traditional temple. We like to say that it was built as a building with a surprise on the inside, because it does look like a regular Greek or Roman temple, but when you get inside, that's when you notice that there's actually the rotunda.
I just want to spend just a second marveling at the scale of this structure. Look at those columns. They are enormous. The ability to get stones that large upright is just a phenomenal feat in itself.
It's phenomenal, and even more so when you consider that this is granite and it's all from Egypt, so it was brought from very far away. This is a building that celebrates the Roman emperors. This building we know had statues of Julius Caesar and then Augustus, so we think that this building then was dedicated always to the worship of the emperors.
So this space opens up just magically.
It does, and the magic is really remarkable. I've taken many visitors there, and I've asked them if they have the same experience that I've had. If you stop right on the threshold and you hold your head straight, I always say, what can you see? And everybody always agrees. You can see the hole in the dome up at the top, we call it the eye. You can see the floor, and you can see the 2 sides left and right. That is to say, this is a grandiose space, but it's right at the limit of human vision. And for me, it always defines what is the classical, which is always derived from the human form, its proportions, and its limitations. And by building a building that exactly corresponds to the limits of our vision, it ennobles us. It makes us feel as big and great as we can feel as humans. It doesn't reduce us. Had it been 10 times bigger, we would have felt ourselves reduced to the size of an ant or something. The building is obsessively concerned with circular form, but it also is concerned with squares. If we look at the floor, we actually see this play of squares and circles.
And then, of course, there are the coffers that create this beautiful sense of rhythm.
Absolutely. And notice we also there get the play of squares and circles, because these are square coffers that give us a semicircular dome. But what's interesting to me about it is, first of all, it was painted. When you go there today, the paint has been completely lost, in the Dome of Heaven motif. So the ground of the dome is painted blue. The coffers are highlighted in yellow as if radiating the light of the sun. And in the middle were probably rosettes that are supposed to be suns or stars. And even in antiquity, we know from a historian who wrote only 100 years after the building was built.
Coffer, maybe this one is coffer, he said.
People wondered, how did they build the dome? How could they do that? They marveled at it even in antiquity. The light is very interesting. If you look at the coffering, you can get the idea that, the light from the eye is going to direct the sunbeams to different coffers at different times of the day, different days of the year. Recent scholarship suggests that this wasn't really a sundial, but there was a play of the passage of time and the play of light on space to indicate the passage of time during the year. There is, though, one alignment that seems to be very intentional, and that is that the sunlight coming through the eye at noon on April 21st exactly illuminated the main doorway of the Pantheon. Remember, Hadrian was the man responsible for the Pantheon in this phase. April 21st was the birthday festival of Rome. Hadrian was very interested in the birthday festival, changed the name to the Romaya, festival in honor of the goddess Rome. He seems to have aligned the building in such a way that there would be this dramatic effect at noon. And you can only imagine there must have been some sort of birthday festival happening in the Pantheon that day.
So let's move back down to the Forum now.
Some of the main roads going through the city met here in the Forum. It's a place that the average Roman on an average day might well pass through.
As the camera pulls back and we can really see the full extent of the city, you really understand how complex, how advanced this ancient world was. How many buildings were here, do we think?
We have 2 censuses from the 4th century AD that suggest there were between 8,000 and 10,000 buildings here. I think the population might have been between 1 and 2 million. The total surface area was about 25 square kilometers, so it was the biggest city in the Western world anyway until 19th century London.
Okay, this is Rome. Entrance bill, right? And now I'm going to show you the video. This is origin of democracy. Oops. Why this is why this is disappeared? Yeah. Why disappeared? Do you know why? Come here, but disappear. Oh, okay. So, original democracy. I can't remember how long it is, 40 minutes or 30 minutes. And just explanation in Japanese. Following. Oh, very short.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Here is the end of our prologue section.
Very short video.
Before we can get to the origins of democracy in Rome, we need to sort of discuss that it's the decline of Greece. Greece's time is coming to an end.
Okay, this is Greece.
Now that by this point, Greece actually has colonies on the Italian peninsula here, on the boot as it is, and there's lots of people living there. There are the Latins and the Etruscans, the Sabines and the Venetians. Well, there they are. So lots of different people who are living on the Italian peninsula there, and the ones that were battling with the Greeks and with everyone else were actually the Latins, and they come to be known as the Romans. They are the victors. So around 600 BC, we have a series of kings who are ruling this city of Rome. Rome, famous for being founded on 7 hills next to the Tiber River. And if you look at Rome from the air today, it's difficult to see, but you can still see these hills. And some of these hills are famous, like the Palatine Hill, etc. But Rome was ruled by a series of kings. And not all of these kings were very nice or very good. And so eventually what happens is you have the people of Rome overthrow the king because, you know, the king wouldn't let them have it their way. Get it? Get it? So anyways, the king, no, not that king. It was a bad king, an evil king. Okay, and the bad kings were eventually overthrown, and the people created a form of government called a republic, in which you vote for someone to make decisions for you. And that republic that ran Rome was called the Senate, and this was their symbol for the people and Senate of Rome. Now, of course, could everyone vote? No. Only citizens. And who could be citizens? Only freeborn males, but still, it is a step forward in democracy. So we had two types of people. We had patricians, who were the nobles, the high-ranking people, and then we had the plebeians. And the way the government was set up was you had the citizen assemblies, you had, which was all the adult male citizens that were freeborn citizens could be in that. You had the senators, you had 10 tribunes, and then you had 2 consuls, one that was in charge of, you know, foreign relations, and one was in charge of.
I forget that. What the difference is between tribunes and senators? Consuls, they just a 2-person government, Roman country. This is not city, country.
Domestic stuff with Rome. So eventually, this citizen assembly keeps pushing and pushing for more rights and more things for the common people. And one of the things that they eventually forced the Senate to pass was something called the 12 Tables. It's 451 BC, and
he said 12 table is this one. This is actually Roman law. This is 12 table. Just, I don't know what the problem is. Arrow disappears. Why disappears arrows? Okay.
What they wanted was for the laws to be written down so everyone could see them and everyone would know what the laws were. And so literally the laws were written down on 12 tablets and posted up for people to see. The 12 Tables establishes the idea that all free citizens have a right to the protection of the law, that the law would be fairly administered, and that you had a right to know what the law was, that you could not be charged with something that you did not know.
Just a moment, you have better read this first. You had better read this first. 300 Senate and 10 people. Okay. It suddenly disappeared. Why? Why? Oh, no, not this one.
Okay. Was against the law. So, some principles of Roman law that you need to know are that you have the right to equal treatment under the law, that you are innocent until you are proven guilty, that the burden of proof rests with the person who's accusing you. So you don't have to prove you're innocent. They have to prove you're guilty. Any law that seems unreasonable or grossly unfair can be set aside, can be examined and set aside. And now all of those things are intrinsic and built in.
So big difference Greece and Rome. Roman democracy is that 300 voted people, they're going to judge like this. But Greece is everybody, civic people could vote, so for decision making. That is the reason why Greece cannot expand their territory. Why Rome is So huge territory they organized because of the Senate is 300 Senate voted from civilian people.
To our law code today. Sorry about my sniffles. Now, the law code did not end when the Republic ended, when Caesar stepped.
Caesar, I think Caesar, no, Caesar. No explanation. This is Theodora and also Justinian, just a moment. This is Caesar.
Stabbed to death on the floor of the Senate, and, according to Shakespeare, et tu, Brute. His nephew was angry. Poor Caesar. That's a little gross. Maybe I should edit that out. But his nephew was very angry and went after some of the people he felt were the perpetrators. And, another Shakespearean reference, sorry. And he crowns himself emperor. Now, as you can see, the Roman Empire in that yellow was all the way up to the death of Caesar in 44 BCE. Now, if we jump forward about 1,000 years, we'll see that the empire is cut in half, and you have all of Europe cut off from the rest of the empire, which became known as the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire was going to be ruled from Constantinople. And one of the next guys you need to know from with this focus is a dude named Justinian. He is the emperor from 482 to 5.
Oh, Justinian. This is here. Justinian. So this is Justinian. And also this video talking about Theodora. Same time princess of Justinian. She is dancer. This is Theodore. This is Justinian. Theodore, Justinian. Japanese never knows how to pronounce his name. Justinian.
565. And here he is with his lovely wife Theodora. They're an interesting power couple. He married her. She was not royal. She was, from some accounts of people, and we can't tell for certain, but there's lots of talk that she was a lady of ill repute before they got married, i.e. she might have been a stripper. But she was a fabulous ruler, and she kept Justinian pretty grounded. One of the things that we credit Justinian with is his code. He took all these just years and years and years of complicated and messed up legal codes of the Romans. I mean, because after the 12 tables, it's not like they stopped making laws. of course, they continued to make laws. And, some of those laws were contradictory and some were good. And so Justinian took them all and he codified them into one code. They're called the Institutes. And then he created a textbook essentially, to give to people, to teach them about the laws. And this is a quote from John Adams, our second president. It proves that government should be a government of laws and not men. The fact that these laws were considered so valuable that he would task just hundreds of people to sift through them and create one intelligent law code shows that governing through laws is the most effective way, is the best way to go. And all this talk of Italy has made me really hungry. And I think I'm going to have pizza. Doesn't pizza sound good? Let's all go get pizza.
Okay, this is original democracy. Theodora and Justinian. 12 tables. Okay, original democracy. Then next is Roman empire. Yes. Takashi, you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Just that now is getting to the history. First of all, I don't write down in Japanese, but we have very detailed, not detailed, sorry. This is very politely explained history at this site. So you can find, you can have a very detailed history many places, but this is very compact explanation of Roman history in Japanese. But this one is briefly explained in English about Roman history. So I will show this one. But this one is also, you can see this is Roman history. They prepared certain details in explanation, and each of those is like this. Oh? Not difficult. This one is very easy. This first one, very compact, he is explaining, and everybody understands what this means. Okay, so I'm going to show you the video first. But usually we studied Roman history many years ago, so I studied again. Everybody forgot the history of Rome. But,
hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to learn...
But this is John Green, is a famous person, and he speaks very fast and very difficult to follow his English, but let's try.
About the Roman Empire, which of course began when two totally non-fictional twins, Romulus and Remus, who'd been raised by wolves, founded a city on 7 hills. Mr. Green, what does SPQR stand for? It means shut pie hole.
No, not this one.
Quickly rapscallion. No, it means Senatus Populusque Romanus, one of the mottos of the...
This one. One of the mottos of
Roman Republic. So today we're going to do some old school great man history and focus on Julius Caesar while trying to answer a question. When, if ever, is it okay to stab someone 23 times? Shakespeare answers that question by saying that Roman senators killed Caesar because he was going to destroy the Roman Republic. But even if that's true, we still have to answer whether A, the Roman Republic was worth preserving, and B, whether Caesar actually destroyed it. One of the things that made the Roman Republic endure, both in reality and in the imagination, was its balance. According to the Greek historian Polybius, the three kinds of government, monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy were all found united in Rome. And it was no easy thing to determine with assurance whether the entire state was an aristocracy, a democracy, or a monarchy.
Okay. Aristocracy, 貴族, democracy, 君主制, monarchy.
At the heart of this blended system was the Senate, a body of legislators chosen from a group of elite families. Rome was divided into two broad classes: the patricians, a small group
Plebeian is 市民.
of aristocratic families, and the plebeians, basically everyone else. The Senate was sort of a mixture of legislature and giant advisory council. Their main job was to set policy for the consuls. Each year, the Senate would choose from among its ranks two co-consuls to serve as
Consul is 護衛官 Consul.
sort of the chief executives of Rome. There needed to be two
Two-person chief executive.
so that they could check each other's ambition, and also so that one could, take care of Rome domestically while the other was off fighting wars, conquering new territory.
Oh, the two-person one is the normal life, and the other one is the war and some other.
There were two additional checks on power. First, the one-year term. I mean, how much trouble can you really do in a year, right? Unless you're the CEO of Netflix. I mean, he destroyed that company in like 2 weeks. And secondly, once a senator had served as consul, he was forbidden to serve as consul again for at least 10 years, although that went a little bit like how you say you're only going to eat one Chipotle burrito per week, and then there are a few exceptions, and then all of a sudden you're there every day, and yes, I know guacamole is more, just give it to me. But right, we were talking about the Romans. So the Romans also had a position of dictator, a person who would take over in the event that the Republic was in imminent danger. The paradigm for this selfless rule
I forgot what this Cincinnatus means. Oh, this is no explanation. Cincinnatus. He explained something right here, right? Just check.
Roman ruler was Cincinnatus,
He is Cincinnatus.
general who came out of comfortable retirement. At his plantation, took command of an army, defeated whatever enemy Rome was battling, and then laid down his command and returned to his farm, safe in the knowledge that one day the second largest city in Ohio would be named for him. If that model of
Oh, George Washington.
leadership sounds familiar to Americans, by the way. It's because George Washington was heavily influenced by Cincinnatus when he invented
Cincinnatus. I don't prepare explanation for Cincinnatus. Maybe Cincinnatus, this one. Too big. Okay. 对不起。He's a person of early stage of Roman Republic, legendary figure. That's the reason why he said Washington. Okay. This is his first stage of the Roman Republic. He is a politician and statesman and military leader. Cincinnatus. Okay. I didn't write down the explanation for him. So that's the reason he said Washington.
The idea of the two-term president. So along comes Caesar. Gaius Gaius? No, it's Gaius. I know from Battlestar Galactica. Gaius Julius Caesar was born around 100 BCE to one of Rome's leading families. His birth was somewhat miraculous, requiring a surgical procedure that we know today as a Caesarian section, coming as he did from the senatorial class. It was natural that Caesar would serve in both the army and the Senate, which he did. He rose through the ranks, and after some top-notch generaling and a gig as the governor of Spain, he decided to run for consul. In order to win, Caesar needed financial help, which he got from Crassus, one of Rome's richest men. Crassus ran a private fire company whose business model was essentially, hey, I notice your house is on fire. Give me some money and I'll help you out with that. Caesar succeeded in becoming consul in 59 BCE, and thereafter sought to dominate Roman politics by allying himself with Crassus and also with Rome's other most powerful man, the general Pompey. You'll no doubt remember Pompey from his fascination with Alexander the Great. Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar were the so-called First Triumvirate. And the alliance worked out super well for Caesar, not so well for the other two. Let's go to the thought bubble. After a year as consul that included getting the Senate to pass laws largely because of intimidation by Pompey's troops, Caesar landed the governorship of Gaul, at least the southern part of Gaul that Rome controlled. He quickly conquered the rest of Gaul, and his 4 loyal armies, or legions as the Romans called them, became his source of power. Caesar continued his conquests, invading Britain and waging another successful war against the Gauls. While he was away, Crassus died in battle with the Parthians, and Pompey, who had become Caesar's rival and enemy, was elected consul. Pompey and the Senate
consul, the two presidents. One of those is Pompey.
Decided to try to strip Caesar of his command and recall him to Rome. If he returned to Rome without an army, Caesar would have been prosecuted for corrupt consuling and also probably exceeding his authority as governor. So instead, he returned with the 13th Legion. He crossed the Rubicon River, famously saying, "The die is cast," or possibly "let the die be cast." Sorry, thought bubble, sources disagree. Basically, Caesar was invading his own
So Pompey and Caesar, right? Two consul. And Caesar escaped from the Roman city.
hometown. Pompey was in charge of Rome's army, but like a boss led the city, and by 48 BCE, Caesar was in total command of all of Rome's holdings, having been named both dictator and consul. Caesar set out to Egypt to track down Pompey, only to learn that he'd already been assassinated by agents of the pharaoh Ptolemy. Egypt had its own civil war at the time between the pharaoh and his sister/wife Cleopatra. Ptolemy would was trying to curry favor with Caesar by killing his enemy, but Caesar was mad in that the only person who gets to tease my little brother is me kind of way, except with murder instead of teasing. So Caesar sided with, and scootily pooped with, Cleopatra. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Cleopatra went on to become the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt and then bet on Mark, I am the wrong horse. Antony instead of emperor. There's a baby attached to my leg, Augustus. But before all that, Caesar made his way back from Egypt to Rome, stopping off to defeat a few kings in the east on his way, and was declared dictator again. That position was later extended for 10 years and then for life. He was elected consul in 46 BCE and then again in 45 BCE, this last time without a co-consul. By 45 BCE,
so I think Roman history is well understand, otherwise very difficult what he's talking, right? I studied, but I studied preparing this material, but I forget that.
Caesar was the undisputed master of Rome, and he pursued reforms that strengthened his own power. He provided land pensions for his soldiers, restructured the debts of a huge percentage of Rome's debtors, and also changed the calendar to make it look more like the one we use today. But by 44 BCE, many senators had decided that Caesar controlled too much of the power in Rome, and so they stabbed him 23 times on the floor of the Roman Senate. Caesar was duly surprised about this and everything, but he never said et tu, Brute, when he realized Brutus was one of the co-conspirators. That was an invention of Shakespeare. The conspirators thought the death of Caesar would bring about the restoration of the Roman Republic, and they were wrong. For one thing, Caesar's reforms were really popular with the Roman people, who were quick to hail his adopted son Octavian, as well as his second in command, Mark, I am the wrong horse, Antony, and a dude named Lepidus, as a second triumvirate. This triumvirate was an awesome fail.
Awesome failure.
Failure, degenerating into a second civil war. Octavian and Antony fought it out. Antony, being the wrong horse, lost. Octavian won, changed his name to Caesar Augustus, became sole ruler of Rome, attached a baby to his leg, adopted the title emperor, and started printing coins identifying himself as Divini Filius, the son of God. More on that next week. Although Augustus tried to protect and that the forms of the Roman Empire were still intact, the truth was he made the laws, and the Senate had become nothing more than a rubber stamp. Which reminds me, it's time for the open letter. Movie magic! An open letter to the Roman Senate. Open first, let's check what's in the secret compartment. Oh, it's a harmonica. Stan, do you want me to play some old Roman folk songs? Very well. Stan, I just want to thank you for doing such a good job of overdubbing there. Dear Roman Senate, whether you were rubber stamping the laws of Emperor Augustus or stabbing Caesar on the floor of your sacred hall, you were always doing something. I don't want to sound nostalgic for a time when people lived to be 30, a tiny minority of adults could vote, and the best fashion choice was bed sheets. But oh my God, at least you did something. Your Senate was chosen from among the patrician class. Our Senate here in the United States is chosen from among the obstructionist class. But don't get me wrong, Roman Senate, you were terrible. Best wishes, John Green. So did Caesar destroy the Roman Republic? Well, he started started a series of civil wars, he seized power for himself, he subverted the ideas of the Republic, he changed the Constitution, but he's only really to blame if he was the first one to do that. And he wasn't. Take the General Marius, for instance, who rose to power on the strength of his generalship and on his willingness to open up the army to the poor, who were loyal to him personally and not to Rome, and whom he promised land in exchange for their good service in the army. This, of course, required the Romans to keep conquering new land so they could keep giving it to new legionnaires. Marius was also consul 5 times in a row, 60 years before Caesar. Or look at the Roman general Sulla, who, like Marius, ensured that his armies would be more loyal to him personally than to Rome, but who marched against Rome itself and then became its dictator, executing thousands of people in 81 BCE, 30 years before Caesar entered the scene. There's another way of looking at this question altogether. If we dispense with great man history, maybe Rome became an empire before it had an emperor. Like, remember the Persian Empire? You'll recall that that empire had some characteristics that made it imperial, like a unified system of government, continual military expansion, and a diversity of subject peoples. The Roman Empire had all 3 of those characteristics long before it became the Roman Empire. Like, Rome started out as a city, and then it became a city-state, and then a kingdom, and then a republic. But that entire time, it was basically comprised of the area around Rome. By the 4th century BCE, Rome started to incorporate its neighbors, like the Latins and the Etruscans, and pretty soon they had all of Italy under their control. But that's not really diversity of subject peoples. I mean, nothing personal Italians, but you have a lot of things in common, like the constant gesticulations. If you want to talk about real expansion and diversity, you've got to talk about the Punic Wars. These were the wars that I remember
Punic War is this one. For instance,
primarily because they involved Hannibal crossing the Alps with freaking war elephants, which was probably the last time that the elephants could have risen up and formed their awesome secret elephant society with elephant planes and elephant cars. In the First Punic War, Rome wanted Sicily, which was controlled by the Carthaginians. Rome won, which made Carthage cranky, so they started the Second Punic War. In 219 BCE, Hannibal attacked a Roman town, then led an army across Spain, and then crossed the freaking Alps with elephants. Hannibal and his elephant army almost won, but alas, they didn't, and as a result, the Romans got Spain. People in Spain are definitely not Romans, despite Russell Crowe's character in Gladiator, which means that by 201 BCE, Rome was definitely an empire. The Third Punic War was a formality. Rome found some excuse to attack Carthage and then destroyed it so completely that these days you can't even find it on a map. Eventually, this whole area and a lot more would be incorporated into a system of provinces, and millions of people would be ruled by the Roman Empire. And it's ridiculous to say that Rome was a republic until Augustus became Rome's first official emperor, because by that time Rome had been an empire for almost 200 years. There's a reason I'm arguing that the death of the republic came long before Caesar, and probably around the time that Rome became an empire. If anything destroyed the idea of republican Rome, it was the concentration of power into the hands of one man. And this man was always a general. I mean, you can't march on Rome without an army, after all. Why were there such powerful generals? Because Rome had decided to become an empire, and empires need to expand militarily. Particularly the Roman Empire needed to expand militarily because it always needed new land to give its retired legionnaires. That expansion created the all-powerful general, and the incorporation of diverse peoples made it easier for them to be loyal to him rather than to some abstract idea of the republic. Julius Caesar didn't create emperors. Empire created them. Next week we'll be discussing Christianity, so that shouldn't be controversial. Until then, thanks for watching.
I think this John Green's presentation is very compacted for Roman history. For Japanese, it's almost difficult to understand the sequential emperors who's going to stand. So I need to prepare the contents of scenario of the Roman Empire. And just watching his video, it's very difficult to recognize who organized this country, right? Takahashi, did you study the Roman Empire before?
No.
So also you don't, huh? I studied at that time, I prepared this material, but I forgot it. Ah, my God. I need to,
just remembering sometimes in high school and junior high school.
Yeah, so I think,
Textbook. It's a curiosity.
Yeah, so I think this watching video, maybe, nobody understand all the ancient Roman politics and also this one, this Punic War. So I think we need to prepare some summarize of all this history. Otherwise, watching this video, but very difficult to understand what's going on, right? Oh, maybe this one is. Again, John Green. I think I had better prepare the Roman Empire's history, otherwise very difficult to just watching this video is almost impossible to understand the contents. This one is, I think, summarized ancient Greece and Roman. Just have a look. Maybe I don't know. Do you understand this video or not? If this is John Green, I think it looks like this. Very difficult to understand.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to do some legitimate comp civ for those of you into that kind of thing. Stan, I can't help but feel that we have perhaps too many globes. That's better. Today we're going to learn about the horrible totalitarian Persians and the saintly democracy-loving Greeks. But of course we already know this story. There were some wars in which no one wore any shirts and everyone was reasonably fit. The Persians were bad. The Greeks were good. Socrates and Plato are awesome. The Persians didn't even philosophize. The West is the best. Go team!
I'm going to slow down 75%.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to do some legitimate comp civ for those of you into that kind of thing. Stan, I can't help but feel that we have perhaps too many globes. That's better. Today we're going to learn about the horrible totalitarian Persians and the saintly democracy-loving Greeks. But of course we already know this story. There were some wars in which no one wore any shirts and everyone was reasonably fit. The Persians were bad. The Greeks were good. Socrates and Plato are awesome. The Persians didn't even philosophize. The West is the best. Go team! Yeah, well, no. Let's start with the Persian Empire, which became the model for pretty much all land-based empires throughout the world, except for, wait for it, the Mongols. Much of what we know about the Persians and their empire comes from an outsider writing about them, which is something we now call history. And one of the first true historians was Herodotus, whose famous book, The Persian Wars, talks about the Persians quite a bit. Now, the fact that Herodotus was Greek is important because it introduces us to the idea of historical bias, but more on that in a second. So the Persian Achaemenid dynasty, Achaemenid? Hold on.
Achaemenid or Achaemenid.
They're both right? I was right twice? Right, so the Persian Achaemenid or Achaemenid dynasty was founded in 539 BCE by King Cyrus the Great. Cyrus took his nomadic warriors and conquered most of Mesopotamia, including the Babylonians, which ended a sad period in Jewish history called the Babylonian exile, thus ensuring that Cyrus got great press in the Bible. But his son Darius I was even greater. He extended Persian control east to our old friend the Indus Valley, west to our new friend Egypt, and north to crash course newcomer Anatolia. By the way, there were Greeks in Anatolia called Ionian Greeks who will become relevant shortly. So even if you weren't Persian, the Persian Empire was pretty dreamy. For one thing, the Persians ruled with a light touch, like conquered kingdoms were allowed to keep their kings and their elites as long as they pledged allegiance to the Persian king and paid taxes, which is why the Persian king was known as the King of Kings. Plus, taxes weren't too high, and the Persians improved infrastructure with better roads, and they had this Pony Express-like mail service of which Herodotus said, "They are stayed neither by snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness, from accomplishing their appointed course with all speed." And the Persians embraced freedom of religion, like they were Zoroastrian, which has a claim to be the world's first monotheistic religion. It was really Zoroastrianism that introduced us to the good-evil dualism we all know so well. You know, God and Satan, or Harry and Voldemort. But the Persians weren't very concerned about converting people of the empire to their faith. Plus, Zoroastrianism forbids slavery, and so slavery was almost unheard of in the Persian Empire. All in all, if you had to live in the 5th century BCE, the Persian Empire was probably the best place to do it. Unless, that is, you believe Herodotus and the Greeks. We all know about the Greeks: architecture, philosophy, literature. The very word music comes from Greek, as does so much else in contemporary culture. Greek poets and mathematicians and architects and philosophers founded a culture that we still identify with, and they introduced us to many ideas, from democracy to fart jokes. And the Greeks gave the West our first dedicated history. They gave us our vocabulary for talking about politics. Plus, they gifted us our idealization of democracy, which comes from the government they had in Athens. Mr. Green! Mr. Green! Mr. Green! Mr. Green! Did you say fart jokes? Oh, you don't ask about Doric, Ionian, or Corinthian columns. You don't ask about Plato's allegory of the cave. It's all scatological humor with you. It's time for the open letter? Really? Already? All right. An open letter... Stan, to Aristophanes. Dear Aristophanes. Oh, right, I have to check the secret compartment. Stan, what? Oh. Thank you, Stan. It's fake dog poo. How thoughtful. So good news and bad news, Aristophanes. 2,300 years after your death, this is the good news. You're still reasonably famous. Only 11 of your 40 plays survived. But even so, you're called the father of comedy. There are scholars devoted to your work. Now the bad news. Even though your plays are exceptionally well translated and absolutely hilarious, students don't like to read them in schools. They're always like, why do we gotta read this boring crap? And this must be particularly galling to you because so much of what you did in your career was make fun of boring crap, specifically in the form of theatrical tragedies. Plus, you frequently used actual crap to make jokes, such as when you had the chorus in the Acharnians imagining a character in your play throwing crap at a real poet you didn't like. You, Aristophanes, who wrote that under every stone lurks a politician, who called wealth the most excellent of all the gods. You, who are responsible for the following conversation. I want all to have a share of everything, and everything to be in common. There will no longer be rich or poor. I shall begin by making land, money, everything that is private property, common to all. But who will till the soil? The slaves. And yet you're seen as homework, drudgery. That, my friend, is a true tragedy. On the upside, we did take care of slavery. It only took us 2,000 years. Best wishes, John Green. When we think about the high point of Greek culture, exemplified by the Parthenon and the plays of Aeschylus, what we're really thinking about is Athens in the 4th century BCE, right after the Persian Wars. But Greece was way more than Athens. Greeks lived in city-states, which consisted of a city and its surrounding area. Most of these city-states featured at least some form of slavery, and in all of them, citizenship was limited to males. Sorry, ladies. Also, each of these city-states had its own form of government, ranging from very democratic, unless you were a woman or a slave, to completely dictatorial. And the people who lived in these cities considered themselves citizens of that city, not of anything that would ever be called Greece. At least until the Persian Wars. So between 490 and 480 BCE, the Persians made war on the Greek city-states. This was the war that featured the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 brave Spartans battled, if you believe Herodotus, 5 million Persians, and also the Battle of Marathon, which is a plain about 26.2 miles away from Athens. The whole war started because Athens supported those aforementioned Ionian Greeks when they were rebelling in Anatolia against the Persians. That made the Persian king Xerxes mad, so he led 2 major campaigns against the Athenians, and the Athenians enlisted the help of all the other Greek city-states. In the wake of that shared Greek victory, the Greeks began to see themselves as Greeks rather than as Spartans or Athenians or whatever. And then Athens emerged as the de facto capital of Greece and then got to experience a golden age, which is something that historians make of. But a lot of things did happen during the Golden Age, including the Parthenon, a temple that became a church, and then a mosque, and then an armory, until finally settling into its current gig as a ruin. You also had statesmen like Pericles, whose famous funeral oration brags about the golden democracy of Athens with rhetoric that wouldn't sound out of place today. If we look to the laws, they afford equal justice to all in their private differences. If a man is able to serve the state, he is not hindered by the obscurity of his condition. And when you combine that high-minded rhetoric with the undeniable power and beauty of the art and philosophy that was created in ancient Athens, it's not hard to see it as the foundation of Western civilization. And if you buy into this, you have to be glad that the Greeks won the Persian Wars. But even if you put aside the slavery and other injustices in Greek society, there's still trouble. Do I have to say it? Seriously? Fine. Trouble. Right here in River City with a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for Peloponnese. Pericles' funeral oration comes from a later war, the Peloponnesian War, which was a 30-year conflict between the Athenians and the Spartans. The Spartans did not embrace democracy, but instead embraced a kingship that functioned only because of a huge class of brutally mistreated slaves. But to be clear, the war was not about Athens trying to get Sparta to embrace democratic reform. Wars rarely are. It was about resources and power, and the Athenians were hardly saintly in all of this, as evidenced by the famous Melian dialogue. Let's go to the thought bubble. So in one of the most famous passages of Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians sailed to the island of Melos, a Spartan colony, and demanded that the Melians submit to Athenian rule. The Melians pointed out that they'd never actually fought with the Spartans, and were like, listen, if it's all the same to you, we'd like to go Switzerland on this one, except of course they didn't say that because there was no Switzerland, to which the Athenians responded, and here I am quoting directly, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." Needless to say, this is not a terribly democratic or enlightened position to take. This statement, in fact, is sometimes seen as the first explicit endorsement of the so-called theory of realism in international relations. For realists, interaction between nations or peoples or cultures is all about who has the power. Whoever has it can compel whoever doesn't have it to do pretty much anything. So what did the meritocratic and democratic Athenians do when the Melians politely asked not to participate in the fight? They killed all the Melian men and enslaved all the women and children. So yes, Socrates gave us his interrogative method, Sophocles gave us Oedipus, but the legacy of ancient Greece is profoundly ambiguous. All the more so because the final winner of the Peloponnesian War were the dictatorial Spartans. Thanks for the incredible bummer, Thought Bubble. So here's a non-rhetorical question. Did the right side win the Persian Wars? Most classicists and defenders of the Western tradition will tell you that of course we should be glad the Greeks won. After all, winning the Persian Wars set off the cultural flourishing that gave us the classical age, and plus, if the Persians had won with their monarchy, they might have strangled democracy in its crib and gave us more one-man rule. And that's possible, but as a counter to that argument, let's consider three things. First, it's worth remembering that life under the Persians was pretty good, and if you look at the last 5,000 years of human history, you'll find a lot more successful and stable empires than you will democracies. Second, life under the Athenians wasn't so awesome, particularly if you were a woman or a slave, and their government was notoriously corrupt. And ultimately, the Athenian government derived its power not from its citizens, but from the imperialist belief that might makes right. It's true that Athens gave us Socrates, but let me remind you, they also killed him. Well, I mean, they forced him to commit suicide. Whatever, Herodotus, you're not the only one here who can engage in historical bias. And lastly, under Persian rule, the Greeks might have avoided the Peloponnesian War, which ended up weakening the Greek city-states so much that Alexander, coming soon, the Great's father, was able to conquer all of them, and then there were a bunch of bloody wars with the Persians, and all kinds of horrible things, and Greece wouldn't glimpse democracy again for 2 millennia, all of which might have been avoided if they had just let themselves get beaten by the Persians. All of which forces us to return to the core question of human history. What's the point of being alive? I've got good news for you, guy. You're only going to have to worry about it for about 8 more seconds. Should we try to ensure the longest, healthiest, and most productive lives for humans? If so, it's easy to argue that Greece should have lost the Persian Wars. But perhaps lives are supposed to be lived in pursuit of some great ideal worth sacrificing endlessly for. And if so, maybe the glory of Athens still shines, however dimly. Those are the real questions of history. What's the point of being alive? How should we organize ourselves? What should we seek from this life? Those aren't easy questions, but we'll take another crack at them next week when we talk about the Buddha. I'll see you then. Crash Course is produced and directed by...
I think this one, the Persian War and Greece, this is for... I do not understand. I forget that all of those already a couple months ago I prepared. So I think for Japanese people, I need to prepare the explanation of those series of words. So otherwise, very difficult for us to understand. Even if those context itself is, I forget that I don't understand. Greece is half of those contexts I understand, but Belgian War is completely I don't understand, right? So this John Green's 2 videos, I need to prepare something for. Otherwise, reading this material, maybe nobody understands the context of this one, right? Oh my God. So, maybe many years ago we studied this history, Roman history, but we should summarize context, right? Very difficult to understand. Almost all key person, and key person is also Japanese saying, English saying, different person. So they are the issues. So I need to spend time to prepare this one. Otherwise, reading this book. Oh my God, very difficult to understand. So this is the end of Roman democracy, but I think following it, 4 pillar democracies are the other issues I explained before. So this is these 2 videos I need to add some more explanation for the contents of this material. Oh my God. We need to study it more clearly understanding, right? So I'm going to do it. It's maybe this week or next week, whatever. So this is I support to discuss about these issues. But today's last 2 John Green videos for me, I forgot that. This is not easy to understand. So what we going to do today? I think this is the first one. Just a moment. This Roman, Greece Roman democracy. We need to study history again. No, not good. This one. I think any others already I discussed before. Takahashi, did you join last week?
Yes, I did.
Good. I think this one is already everything I already explained, right?
Yes.
Right?
And
So,
we have the long way to Asian and Roman democracy, and what could we have? What could we have some takeaway by the coming through the Asian and Roman democracy? So what we study is the Asian the democracy is more inclusive, except the ladies and slavery. As far as you're man and not a slave, then you can participate as a part of the democracy. But this system couldn't survive for a long time. It's not designed to withstand some pressure from outside. And as we just studied the Roman democracy, or more like the empire, and their system is functioning more like meritocracy, and
you're
yeah.
talking about what is most ideal regime we supposed to think.
Yeah, there are many aspects of thinking what is ideal.
Why I show you the Roman and Greece democracy? Because a very similar situation will be coming next 10 years And at that time they have slavery, but now it's automation. So unemployment is actually in Finland. They keep their as a basic income. They pay money for them, everybody. But country is not so big but small. But for 2,000 unemployment people, the government pay money for them. No, not tentatively. They are going to continue forever. So this kind of situation will going to be coming to us. This is very similar to Greece democracy, but I think government organization structure is very close to Roman Empire. This is 300 people is voted as a member of the government organization, Diet, Parliament, and sort of, they're going to lead their country, try to govern Roman country, empire. So they are civilian or ordinary people, how they're going to live in at that time. This is very important for us to study what their goal, what their dream, what they are intending to survive for that age. And Greece democracy, Roman Empire, after that there are different ages coming. This is authoritarian age. I studied the global history, but I almost forgot it. But I don't try to study all the way around the history, but I just only focus on Greece and Roman history. And but usually Japanese people, everybody forgot it. So I need to focus on what kind of level of life they are setting up goal, or how to they what is their daily life, how was their their family looks like. Sort of things is not easy to figure out what was that. Maybe I tried looking for many material documents, maybe I can find that, but I couldn't. So I tried to show you the history of both history, but this is not easy to understand. Many names, many words, but we are not familiar with. But I just today I have a look, but I don't understand well. But anyway, we need to summarize what kind of history they spend, and including what kind of people and what kind of war they involve. But most major concern is what kind of lifestyle actually they spend at that time. So maybe we're going to get something study, maybe philosophy or some Aristotle or some other Plato or some other people. We had a better analyze for those people what they said, maybe more beneficial for us to consider for our futures, our setting goal or something. So I think we need to study. The democracy is not, just democracy. Is I set up goal is only not only simply talking about the current how the government is governed, their rule or system. Not only that, but if you go, okay, I wanted to study actually the civilian or ordinary people living there past 2,500 years. All the way they have a dream, and they have consider for how to maintain their family and life and the future goal and everything else. this is year by year they're changing their goal, their objective, but still, basic lifestyle never change, even if technology, even if many kind of philosophies and changing, but basic lifestyle still the same. This is my feeling. Also, the country by country, they have different, but some country very rich, some country very poor. Now I'm preparing South Asia is very poor, but we need to focus on each people. What is their goal? What is they're chasing for, and what our lifestyle is supposed to be, and also history, concept for history. They are moving toward in future, not smooth way going to attain the goal. There's always environment changing. So, like as we discussed about the United States a couple months ago, also Trump changed a lot of rules, environment change or employment and global trade, everything he tried to turn around. So how we're going to treat for those changes? Actually, they're going to change. So it is very difficult to consider for in the past experience. But also we need to consider what happened in the 2,500 years ago. Because those era, ordinary people, civilian, they don't do any work, okay? What they did in the 2,500 years ago. But this kind of situation will maybe coming up 10 years later. Not everybody, but many people maybe the government will going to pay money for them. So this is my objective to study Greece democracy, Roman democracy. But unfortunately, John Green is a very good person, but he too much summarized the history of the both countries, and I couldn't catch up with detail about what he's talking about. I think we had better prepare material to better understanding for that two videos. But also I need to prepare something, what kind of lifestyle we're going to study from the ancient people. Maybe this one is philosophy, or old people, ancient people written down many materials, philosophical materials. But if we try to get into those areas, I think another sophisticated, but I don't want to discuss about so much sophisticated area, more simplified, talking about this discussion. Okay, this is next week or 2 weeks later, or whenever, I try to spare time to try to rewrite those areas. Otherwise, if just you're going to have a look, but nobody don't understand. If you have depth understanding about Greece history and Roman history, I think this is important to prepare some additional explanation. Otherwise, this is losing time, right? So we did. Let's see. By the way, we finished China, right? But I don't think. Did you study Chinese artificial intelligence revolution? Cashless revolution? You didn't, right? Takashi, did you study this?
Yeah, honestly, you gave me some part of this the sessions.
Yeah, but did you? Yeah, I gave you material. But did you study this?
Maybe.
This is because I gave you material, but I didn't explain the detail about that. And also, this one is I studied. I additional explanation on this material, but this one basically I studied. But no, this is China. No, China is this one. It's regime. No, still wrong. Oh, this one. China's artificial intelligence revolution. And this one is also they are thinking about strategy. Never Japanese people doing that. 2030, they focus on 2030. And Japanese government or Japanese company never consider for 10 years later. They are thinking 10 years later. And also first step is 2020. And they prepared video. So I didn't show you this video, right?
It's just video.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I looked through the video last weekend, but yeah.
Swarm intelligence. This is a new one. Do you know this?
No.
Swarm intelligence. You know this? China is thinking about many kinds of advanced technology. And some of those I'm familiar, but some of those I don't know that. I study those. Since all those material gave to Takahashi, I added some slides and comments of it. This one is did you see this, right? Takahashi.
Yes.
Did you see this?
Yeah, I personally looked.
Personally, you watch it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And one reason why many want to be friends with China could be its image as a future global leader. And while in Hollywood films, high-tech robots.
So you watch it? You watched it? Oh, this is very short video.
Chinese engineers may be able to change your mind.
Maybe
Somea takes a closer look at the role artificial intelligence might play in the future.
No, you didn't.
Yes. No.
We've all seen it or read it somewhere that someday in the near future, artificial intelligence will become the greatest threat to humanity and an army of evil robots will kill us all. Okay. Point taken. They can be quite scary in movies. In reality, though, it's a different story, particularly in China. Over the past 2 years, several restaurants there have started using robot waiters. Always polite with a big smile on their faces. And the best part, there's no need to tip them. At first, all this generated a lot of buzz on Chinese social media. But according to a local newspaper, many of them have now been, well, fired.
How can you call them robots? They're machines.
These robots don't look good. They should be built to look like Chinese female celebrities, with skin that looks like ours.
And that's exactly what China's University of Science and Technology did. Earlier this month, they unveiled the country's first ever interactive robot, Jaja.
你吃过饭了吗？你想吃什么就吃什么吧，对自己好点，主人晚安。
See if you can figure out who this is.
I think robotics is a new manufacturing, and it can help people.
This is too creepy. I feel uncomfortable just looking at it.
In the country's first ever World Robots Conference last year, Vice President Li Yuanchao made it clear that robotics would be a major priority for China's economic future. Can we interpret this as the world's second largest economy and biggest manufacturer trying to carry out its own robot revolution? and replacing its human workers with robots.
The problem is us. The problem is that the contradictions that are embedded in the way society has been organized in the past are going to come unraveled as a result of the changes that the technology brings.
Yeah, this one is
And one reason
Chinese. And then also I showed Amelia, but not. Oh no, Amelia is in Philippines. Takashi, did you see the Amelia?
Amelia, yes, it's only in the display and in the software, not physical robot.
This one is, next one is Sophia. Did you see this, right? This one, right? Somewhere, did you see this? This one, the new one. This one is very new one. July. Takashi, did you see this?
Yes.
I think they're ready.
Sumaya, did you see this?
Hello.
Sophia is capable of natural facial expressions. She has cameras in her eyes and algorithms which allow her to see faces, so she can make eye contact with you. And she can also understand speech and remember the interactions, remember your face. So this will allow her to get smarter over time. Our goal is that she will be as conscious, creative, and capable.
This one is the most advanced robot in the world for facial expression. And many robot is in the market, but she is the most advanced one. Most advanced. Takai, so you watch all of those already?
I'm not sure all of those, but yeah.
How about this?
こちらはシャーロット。彼女は晴れやかな気分です。そのわけは
Over the 20th century, the development of automated machinery has propelled modern industry and manufacturing into new heights of productivity. However, the cost of this technological advancement has been the displacement of
this is one I gave you
jobs
before.
across the world.
Yes.
In contrast, white-collar labor
I
has
saw
always
it
been
last week in the morning, but only
Partly, not all of them.
Regarded as safe from the automation that has contracted the manufacturing workforce. The thought of machines replacing educated and skilled professionals has usually seemed a distant problem of the future. That is, until now. In the past few years, progress in artificial intelligence has skyrocketed, and computers are now learning to solve complex problems better and faster than human beings. As learning algorithms and computing power continue to advance, many jobs that were once thought to be impossible to automate are slowly but surely converting to a silicon workforce. My name is Nathan, and welcome to Caspian Report. Fears of automation can be traced back to the Luddites of the early 1800s. The Luddites were skilled middle-class weavers and textile artisans whose work became virtually obsolete due to the introduction of weaving machinery. This dramatic economic change due to advancing technology, combined with a lack of social and labor rights, caused many Luddites to revolt against factory owners out of desperation. In the 20th century, the role of Luddites were assumed by craftsmen and manual laborers of all kinds, and automated robots took the place of manually operated weaving machines. Automation has now penetrated every part of the manufacturing process, and in the United States there exists one automated industrial machine for every 500 workers.
For the most part, industrial machines in the 20th century were created to complete very fixed and specific tasks. This technological cycle is familiar and has occurred multiple times over the past 2 centuries, with a general consensus that they only cause temporary displacement of labor and do not lead to mass unemployment in the long term. However, the latest wave of AI has introduced a new challenge that has never been encountered before. What happens to humans when machines are able to learn?
Humanity cannot survive.
When machines are able to learn. Artificial intelligence has seen recent success mainly due to a combination of concepts known as neural networks and deep learning. This development is only recently practical due to the computing power of modern graphics processing units. It aims to mimic the workings of the human brain, and it allows AIs to learn complex tasks through pattern recognition over vast amounts of training data. These techniques, combined with the massive amounts of data gathered by tech giants like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, have resulted in remarkable achievements that were previously thought to be years out of reach. Google's DeepMind technology, which it had acquired in 2014, has been a pioneer in the machine learning field and is a great example of how far AI has advanced in such a short amount of time. In just a few years, DeepMind has been successfully applied to relatively simple tasks like detecting spam emails to more complex problems such as determining cases of eye disease from images of retinal scans. In 2015, it had successfully learned to play 29 Atari video games completely on its own, and by 2016, the DeepMind-trained AlphaGo AI famously became the first computer to ever beat a top professional Go player. A more practical example is Android speech recognition, which is powered through communication with a network of 16,000 computers and 100 billion connections, collectively known as Google Brain. AI has also made its way into the automotive industry through a joint effort by Google and NVIDIA, a manufacturer of cutting-edge processors, to apply neural networks to self-driving cars. Although most AI research is conducted by US-owned and operated companies, China is also investing heavily in the field and is rapidly closing the technology gap. Baidu, which is generally regarded as the Chinese equivalent to Google, even employs a team of its own AI scientists in Silicon Valley and is an example of how tech giants in China are accelerating their research to compete. There is still much work ahead, but Google and other industry leaders have proven that the possible applications for DeepMind and machine learning in general are enormous. The market opportunities of this new wave of AI have not gone unnoticed, and from 2010 to 2015, investment into artificial intelligence companies quadrupled to over $8 billion and has spawned numerous AI companies aiming to disrupt various industries with automated programs that can outperform their human counterparts. One AI startup called Analytic has successfully developed a system which can process CT scans of lungs and automatically identify features that are likely to signal malignant tumors. When the performance of Analytic's AI was compared to that of human radiologists, not only was its false positive rate 50% better, but it also managed to identify every single tumor in the test case, while the human radiologist had allowed 7% to go unnoticed. These types of applications will continue to develop at a rapid pace over the coming years as investment into AI companies increases. Such a massive potential for disruption across so many markets brings concerns over just how many people may be threatened by job loss due to automation. In a study by the Reserve Bank of St. Louis, it was found that routine jobs for both manual and cognitive labor have already declined in the past 20 years. Computer scientist Jared Kaplan, author of the book Humans Need Not Apply, describes this phenomenon succinctly by explaining that the new coming wave of automation is blind to the color of your collar. More and more routine office jobs like customer support and clerical work are able to be automated by trained AI. This encroachment of automation into white-collar labor has some economists alarmed, while many will argue that in the long run, automation actually creates more jobs than it replaces. Machines are best at completing repetitive tasks and increase overall productivity, which frees up workers to focus on more intellectually challenging or creative work. At the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, IBM CEO Ginni Rometty argued that advanced AI, like IBM's Watson suite, will do more to complement human capabilities rather than completely replace them. Rometty envisions a partnership between man and machine, and is confident that although advances in artificial intelligence will lead to job losses, new forms of employment will take their place. In many cases, automation does more to redefine a job rather than replace it entirely, even if its negative effects are more visible and straightforward than its benefits. When the automated teller machine, or ATM, was introduced to automate basic and routine banking functions, it did not destroy the role of the bank teller. Rather, banks operated more efficiently, and employee roles shifted to more complex tasks and service work, allowing more locations to open in the long run and leading to an overall increase in the amount of banking jobs. Although it is easy to see the jobs that are being rendered obsolete by emerging technology, the new possible industries that can result out of such economic shifts are much more difficult to predict. For example, the prospect of modern computers explained to someone 100 years ago may have sounded as a terrifying job killer, but they also could have never imagined all the various careers in the software industry which emerged as a result of current technology. Nonetheless, this new wave of automation threatens to disrupt developed economies more than any other in the past due to the prevalence of computers in virtually every industry and the sheer range of tasks that machine learning can be applied to. There is real danger in allowing populations to become too dependent on routine labor without being prepared to educate and train workers who are displaced by automation towards more resilient or emergent careers. Governments and employers must be ready to react to the worst scenarios where job losses accelerate more than expected and the unemployed are unable to safely and easily transition into other fields. Key factors in mitigating the negative impacts of automation will be easy and constant access to education and job training. As it becomes increasingly apparent that a single 4-year college education may no longer support an entire life's worth of labor, the idea of lifelong learning is taking hold as a crucial aspect of modern society. A great example of this trend is in the development of massive open online courses, or MOOCs, which provide education in the form of free video lectures and online coursework. These courses aim to be flexible enough to be taken alongside a full-time job, while also providing enough content to effectively teach a certain subject or skill. Quite ironically, one of the most popular MOOCs is the machine learning course provided by Stanford and taught by the renowned computer scientist and former head of AI at Baidu, Andrew Ng. Ng recognized the coming market disruptions that AI would cause and co-founded a MOOC platform called Coursera, which hosts his popular machine learning class. At the 2017 Stanford MSX Future Forum, Ng gave a talk on the state of artificial intelligence and outlined his thoughts on what the future may hold. Here's what he had to say.
I think one of the biggest challenges of education is motivation, right? As in, it's really good for you to take these courses and study, but it's actually really difficult for an individual to find the time and the space and energy to do the learning that gives them these long-term benefits. With AI displacing a lot of jobs, I'm confident that there will be new jobs, but I think also we need a new educational system to help people whose jobs are displaced reskill themselves to take on the new jobs. But I think governments should give people a safety net, but pay the unemployed to study, right? To provide a structure that helps the unemployed to study so as to increase the odds of gaining the skills needed to re-enter the workforce and contribute back to the tax base.
Essentially, Andrew Ng is calling for a reinvention of the modern educational system in combination with a stronger public safety net in order to help prevent individuals from becoming economically irrelevant in an increasingly automated society. But what happens when education and basic welfare aren't enough? There are now serious discussions among economists of introducing some form of universal basic income, or UBI, in developed economies which will provide a fixed amount of income to entire populations. Some believe that a UBI would turn societies lazy and criticize the concept as far too utopian. But advocates argue that if individuals do not need to constantly worry about making a living income, they will be free to both educate themselves better and focus on career paths that are more fulfilling and beneficial to their society. Another argument for UBI is that eventually automation will become so prevalent that there simply will not be enough work to go around, making a redistribution of wealth the next logical step. Of course, such a simple solution is bound to have limitations, and a UBI introduces an entirely new set of
this is what I'm talking about next 10 years.
Issues. Giving everyone an equal amount of income is an inefficient way of assisting those who are hardest hit by job loss and should be directed towards those who will struggle most with adapting to changing economic conditions. Geopolitical concerns are also aplenty, with concerns over open borders and immigrant welfare abuse in a world already tensely divided on such issues. There are many ways that a basic income can be approached, but much research and experimentation needs to be conducted in order to find strategies that work the most effectively. In January 2017, the Finnish government did just that by kicking off an experiment which aims to study the behavior of 2,000 Finns who will receive an unconditional basic monthly income of $587. The program will last...
Oh, this is Finland. $587 from basic income.
2 years, and if successful, could eventually lead to a universal income across the entire country. Other pilot programs are also taking place in California, the Netherlands, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
So many countries.
By both public and private organizations. Properly addressing the drawbacks of AI will allow us to greatly appreciate the many benefits it provides. Fleets of self-driving cars will eventually transform everyday transportation, and less people will need to own cars. The widespread adoption of automated taxis will lead to much less space needed for parking, less pollution, and, more importantly, a drastic reduction in traffic accidents due to human error. Healthcare will become more decentralized as machines take over more routine roles of doctors and nurses, and with the help of AI, patients will be able to accurately diagnose and treat themselves at home. This will free up space in overcrowded hospitals, which will be increasingly dedicated to emergency care. AI is also being used to improve scientific research by processing huge amounts of data and finding patterns that would have been nearly impossible for humans, such as interpreting genome data or analyzing particle collisions. Manufacturing will also become safer as employees are more removed from the physical processes of factories and allow AI to operate more dangerous machinery. The advancement of natural language processing and personal AIs like Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa allow new, more human ways to interact with technology that are more accessible to the elderly or disabled. We are living in the golden age of artificial intelligence, and there is no doubt now that it is already beginning to revolutionize the world economy as we know it. As a result, education will become more important than ever, and we may soon find ourselves questioning the very concept of work itself. Adapting to the AI revolution and redefining modern society around it will certainly be one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. This was a Caspian Report by me, Nathan. I want to give a huge thanks to our supporters on Patreon, and if you want to help out the channel...
Okay, this is future of society. And this one is, I think, this is innovation from China. This text video is Takashi. Did you see this? This one is, I think, 15 minutes to 20 minutes. A Chinese person came back from United States. He just explained the future. This one is...
Hello. I know I look Asian, But I grew up in Silicon Valley, and I'm absolutely sure that your English...
Takashi, did you see this?
Maybe, yes.
Okay, and this one he's talking about defeating the advanced technology, and maybe he graduated in American university, and he's talking about in China's future, what's going to be. How about cashless revolution? Did you see this?
Yeah, although I did, but maybe Somiya-san.
Somiya, he doesn't. But I have a lot of video. Did you see this? Cashless.
Yeah, I did cashless.
Okay. How about China in Africa?
It's totally different.
Yeah, totally different.
No.
Oh, okay. China invading Africa. And they actually only the time is critical, so only point I will explain for this. Colonialism. Only one video? Two video? This is the explanation, right? Oh, this one is... this video is colonialism in Zambia. China. That's young second in Africa. This is very short one.
Toiling for survival in the mines of Africa. Even children are forced to work here. This kid is 11 years old. And behind this boom, the Chinese. China needs Africa's copper and cobalt to feed its fast-growing economy.
People here, they need work. The Chinese come here. We pay maybe the best salary.
The Chinese bring work and money. But it all comes at a tragic human cost. We began our journey at this coal mine in southern Zambia. The Chinese are this mine's new owners. Using technology not seen in the West for 40 years, they're making money and providing jobs. After decades of misrule, 2/3 of Zambians live on less than 50 pence a day. But investors like this Chinese company are now helping to unlock the vast potential of Zambia's mineral wealth. Africa is rich in the commodities China needs to fuel its booming economy. Trade between Beijing and the continent has more than quadrupled since the year 2000. The continent now. Behind us is the main government building, also constructed by the Chinese. China's real target in this part of Africa is Zambia's copper belt, into which Beijing is pouring billions in investment. In 2005, tragedy struck when the Chinese factory supplying explosives for the mine blew up, killing all the Zambian workers inside. The grief of these families is still very raw, and what rubs salt into the wounds for them is that the Chinese company, which promised to take care of this cemetery, has instead let it go to grass. Where were the Chinese when the explosion happened?
They were in their offices, and nobody was in the factory. Nobody was affected.
They said that for months, highly acidic effluent had been spilling from a dam into the watercourses. We've come to the boundary of the Chinese company, and this filthy ditch of effluent comes from the plant. And in fact, the stink is so intense that I'm gagging. Water has a pH of 7 when it's neutral. Sulfuric acid has a pH of 1. At around 2.5, this water was still contaminated months after complaints were first made. Local people frequently complain to us about the way the Chinese operate in Zambia. Still keen to hear what the Chinese company had to say, we visited the compound where they live in high-security, segregated housing. Can you just tell me, why are you not tending the graves of the B-Grim explosives victims?
Those are questions from the company official information.
You in December were producing quite a lot of spillage from the dam. Do you think that your safety measures are adequate to date?
You come here.
Yes.
You ask so many questions.
Yeah, we have tried to.
About this one.
We've written to you.
Okay.
We've listed all of these questions in letter form.
It's not fair for me.
But you have an opportunity to invite us in to look at what improvements there have been in health and safety, and then also environmental standards. But you won't let us do that. Okay. All right. Next day in Lubumbashi, we went looking for the mines. At this open-cast pit, hordes of hungry people scratch in the dirt for a living, creating an apocalyptic scene. In fact, there are 5,000 to 10,000 people working here every day. But the average income here is £60 a year, and life expectancy is less than 45 years. Villagers told us a factory was being built nearby, which has imported dozens of Chinese workers. Yeah. The Chinese here have refused to talk to us. They run most of the factory here. Hello.
No, English, no. 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 This is a secret. Secret. This is secret. No, it's not open.
We don't know what this guy's problem is. A policeman angrily intervened against the Chinese, whom I could see now are loathed by the local Congolese. From what I'd witnessed, the Chinese were secretive and paranoid. That the Chinese pay very badly. They make huge profits, but the money they give to the Congolese is very, very small. Tragically, the extraction of copper and cobalt depends heavily on the exploitation of child labour on a vast scale. All this for electrical cables and phone batteries. Child labour is a major issue. What are you going to do about that?
Any mine I found a child, I'll close it up.
Chinese companies here are in danger of reviving memories of the worst kind of colonial exploitation that a country like Congo is only just recovering from.
Okay, this is the Chinese colonialization in Africa. So new imperialism is another side of it. And then Takashi, from next week I'm going to involve the Southeast Asia, and I support North Korea on Wednesday night, but I switching to this issue is Saturday morning. I have North Korea and also let's see, it's going back to the phone. This one is last week I published. So Saturday morning is North Korea and Republic of South Korea and Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, Indonesia, Taiwan, Thailand, Hong Kong. This is Saturday morning. I'm going to talk about those countries. And this is Saturday, and Wednesday night is Wednesday night is different. Wednesday night is South Asia. Already we finished India, right? India. Did we finish India last week?
Yeah. Definition.
Did I? No, I don't think so. I think I had some more. But anyway, this is Wednesday night is I'm going to handle this week Bangladesh and Afghanistan, Pakistan, Myanmar, Bhutan. Then we did already Turkey, we finished. Then I continue Iraq, Kurd, Syria, Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Yemen. But three countries I don't prepare yet, but this sequence. Then Arab Spring. This is I'm planning to Wednesday night, and the other one is Saturday morning. I close it? Oh no, here. This is Saturday morning. North Korea. This Saturday. And I'm going to study a little bit more about Greece and Roman democracy. I don't decide it, but anyway, I'm going to prepare some material in near future, maybe within several weeks. I'm not familiar with history of Rome and Greece, so I need to study by myself, so it takes time. Okay? Takashi, how do you think?
Topics?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then I'm going to, couple months later, I'm going to get into the Europe and North America. But North America is currently just only United States. But South America is a couple of countries, not so many. Venezuela, Brazil, maybe 2 or 3. Africa, maybe 3 or 4 countries, not many. And then that's finished. I'm going to democracy. So I'm going to publish 5 books. It's already 2 books published. And now I'm going to prepare this one is already, this one already published. And also, third one is this one. But third one is, this one is too much. Too many countries. I can't, I need to separate, but which remaining portion, which one I had better combine, but I haven't decided. But this is third one, and fourth one is Europe and US, fifth one is Africa and South America. But part of those is moving to Africa. This one. This is my plan, and then I'm going to move into the China imperialism, and then after that I'm going to need to discuss about American politics and economy. Again, going back to the original plan. So this Wednesday night Bangladesh. Bangladesh is very interesting. Those are very interesting, not stable. Not stable. Big difference compared with Southeast Asia. not easy to discuss. Okay? So, Takashi, okay, you, any question? No? Okay, so today is very hard days. So, usually Wednesday night you are very busy, right?
Yeah, it depends. Depends on me.
Okay, if you have time, you can join. Wednesday night is this week. Tomorrow morning we don't do that, okay? We don't have session tomorrow morning. We don't. And Wednesday night I'm going to make presentation Bangladesh. Okay? So, Somaya, do you have any question?
No.
How do you feel today? I'm sorry, last...
It's wrong for 3 of us.
Huh?
Time is wrong.
Time is wrong. But last, Roman democracies, I'm sorry because I forget that. I didn't prepare well, so I'm going to prepare some material for someday. Okay? So, Takashi, today I'll finish, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Okay? And I need to close this video anyway. Problem is, click here to pause.